Yes, we are live with a special extravaganza on NHL trade deadline day. Welcome to the Shaun Starr Show on YouTube.com. We have our eyes monitored on TSN on the big screen. All's quiet in the opening hours of the NHL trade deadline. We're going to have an extravaganza. Our first real live show on a Friday where we're going to bring in a bunch of guests. And we're going to monitor and break it down as it happens. So let's not waste any time because obviously Marco D'Amico, who you've grown to enjoy on this program for the last couple of months, joins us from the confines of a beautiful vacation spot. We're not going to blow it up, but Marco, thank you so much for breaking away from the family and the vacation and the fun in the sun. Let's talk a little NHL trade deadline. You're not surprised things are quiet out of the chute here, are you?
No, not at all. I think I think we've seen the prices so far. I think everybody kind of sees it's a seller's market at this point, and I don't think many teams are really looking to spend that level. Like top end contenders will, as we saw with the Brock Nelson trade yesterday. But I just don't see, the middling contenders, the guys that are in the third division slot or in a wild card race necessarily wanting to give up big assets just this second. They want to see how it plays out. And we'll definitely see an uptick probably around noon, 1 o'clock.
We're going to have Dan Robertson on, the voice of the Winnipeg Jets on TSN Regional.
Oh,
Dan will be
that's
on.
a get.
Yeah, Dan will be on with us in about an hour's time. We have a limited time with Marco. We're also going to touch base with JP O'Connor from TSN 690 on the radio broadcast as we get set for what's going to happen. So, Marco, I don't know if you see the comment on the screen from Bim Tapes, who suggests that he'd be content with a quiet day from the Canadiens, maybe trade some futures, but like to see them kind of keep the cookie jar full. So why don't you tackle that for us? What you think Montreal's maybe going to do today, and you can answer nothing. That's an acceptable answer if you break it down for us.
Yeah, I mean, I can understand the desire to try and add at this point, but you also have to factor in the prices are just so incredibly inflated right now, much more than they would be, say, in late June.
Yeah.
So the way that I am kind of seeing it is unless some deal miraculously happens or some player becomes available, I just don't like what do the Canadiens have to offer right now that would entice someone to let go, because I don't feel like anybody is going to trade a significant hockey piece unless you go and give up some hockey piece. And I know a lot of people probably like throw names like the injured Kirby Dach, an Alex Newhook, a Mike Matheson. That's not happening. Not at this stage, not right now. You'd be selling low on the former two, and Matheson is not going anywhere. So if the price keeps going up, like Ricky says here on the comments, it's not, they're not in the best interest to move. In fact, what I would say is it would make sense to move one of our Mia or a Savard if the prices keep going up, because had you told me 2 weeks ago that either of them could potentially bring back a second plus, I would not necessarily have been inclined to agree. From what I was told recently, that seems to be the going rate for guys like that right now, especially with the fact that the Canadiens can retain one more contract. And that's something to keep an eye on, because if they don't do it for their own player, they may be, pushed to be a broker as they've done the last couple of deadlines.
So as you see the comment there from Ricky Martin, nice to have pop sensation Ricky Martin on the live stream with us today, Marco. We talked about the price going up. As you just correctly outlined, I kind of see it the way you do, that Montreal isn't in the business of the rental player at this point. What about taking on term? Like whether it's 2 or 3 years, obviously Brock Nelson, right? Brock Nelson was the big chip that fell last night. He leaves the Islanders and goes to the Colorado Avalanche. So maybe that closes the door for Colorado with a bunch of different options. But could you think a player like Brock Nelson, that type of player with term left on the deal, would that make sense in your mind to bridge the gap with Kirby Dach's injury and Owen Beck not ready to take on that role full time?
For the sake of doing it, no. I think you got like as a number 2 center, as we see with Kirby Dach, I think you got to get it right. And if you're just kind of rushing into it, like one of the guys that I was told could potentially be available right now is Jared McCann, who has been really productive as a center. Been playing mostly left wing this year, but that's mainly because, you look at a team like Seattle, they've got nothing but centers in their top 9 with Chandler Stevenson, Shane Wright, Matty Beniers, etc. So I get why they would move him to the wing, because I don't think he's part of their long-term future. And that's somebody the Canadiens can look at. but is that a bona fide number 2 center, right? Like he was in the past. Would he be at this point with the way the Canadiens are set up? It would probably not cost very little. It would cost a lot to get him. Think the equivalent of at least 2 first-round picks. In my, the value of, which at this stage I don't necessarily see, unless the Anaheim Ducks decide to sell low on Trevor Zegras. I just don't see right now. I don't see the point. You can reward your core all they want, but they also, like I said, like this is the key that I'd like to bring to people's attention. Had they been more consistent, they'd be a playoff team. Right?
Agreed.
Had they not lost those 5 in a row before the Four Nations, they would be in a playoff spot. If they had even gone 500 during that time, they'd be in a playoff spot. So I'm all about rewarding the core, but I also want to like there's a point in time where you can reward the core, but you also have to hold them accountable. Like if you're in a spot right now where this team needs to buy to make the playoffs, this core didn't do its job. And I think that's not to be disrespectful to them. Like they absolutely positively need to get better. And, we'll get into that notion. But if you look at a guy like Dylan Cousins, for example, the trade for Dylan Cousins, the Montreal Canadiens don't have anything that's equivalent to that they can get right now.
You know what Darren Dreger told Connor McKenna and I this morning when he joined us at 6:35 before he jumped on TSN at 8 o'clock this morning. He said directly from Kevin Adams, he named his source, and his source is Kevin Adams, that Adams does not want picks. He wants players, plural, ready to go. Players that if Dylan Cousins leaves Buffalo today, or if he leaves Buffalo this summer, destined for another team, he wants nothing to do with picks. He wants players. Dylan Cousins, in your mind, Marco, the Canadiens aren't going to give up players for Dylan Cousins, right? Like,
well, Dylan Cousins is realistically about to get traded for Josh Norris and Jacob Bernard-Docker.
Yeah.
Who do the Canadiens have as an equivalent to that in terms of value? Do you because Josh Norris, for all his injury issues, you need a number. That's a number 2 center, right? So if you're going to make that trade, who's your number 2 center that you can give? And if anybody tells me Kirby Dach, I may just throw this laptop. But I think like when you look at value and why the Canadiens aren't on this, if the Sabres don't want futures, that's all the Canadiens really have to give. And I think the best time to trade futures to add to your lineup is the summer. It's unfortunate. And I know it's not the sexy answer. And I know a lot of people are going to be like, we want to help this team make the playoffs now, but I just don't see it, right? A player that I could see maybe in the summer, a team selling low on would be like a Casey Middlestat, would be like Trevor Zegras, because those teams are going to be looking to shift, either in Colorado's case, take an asset, get something back, and maybe make a trade for something else, like they did with the Canadiens when they traded Alex Newhook. They turned around and added Ross Colton with part of that return. And so I could see that kind of a trade happening. But again, it's really boring. It sucks for our listeners. But it's just, this is, especially with the way the market is right now, this is just not the time. The Canadiens are not there. They're ahead of schedule, which is great in terms of what they're doing. If you would have told me they would be within 1 point of a playoff spot on the trade deadline, I would not have bet on that. So power to them. But you cannot deviate from the plan at this point unless you're trading other expendable guys at a higher rate to get other assets that can help you buy what you need. But I think, unfortunately, with the Kirby Dach injury, the Canadiens are in the situation that they're in. I would expect minor moves to flesh out the roster so that they could potentially send a guy like Owen Beck back down to Laval.
Yeah.
But I wouldn't expect anything sexy. I mean, they may pick somebody up on the waiver wire at 2:00. We'll see. But I think that's when the waiver wire hits, that's when you may see a couple minor trades here or there.
That's Marco D'Amico. Follow him on social at MN D'Amico with RG Media. And of course, always on the Shaun Starr show during the Montreal Canadiens season. We get going here. Is lots of comments, Marco, are flooding the chat. Salil, proud member of the Shaun Starr show, talks about Brock Nelson and that move. Casey Middlestat, left-handed center. That's a point you've brought up a lot on the show. That's something that needs to be addressed, right? The dearth of right-handed centermen, to the point where sometimes Kirby Dach, when he was healthy, in an important draw, they would slide Alex Newhook in there. And And the other comment I see popping up a lot here in our live stream today, Marco, is Pierre Maguire's opinion that he shared yesterday on Dylan Cousins. Talked about him as one of the best two-way centers, and actually threw out a proposal that he would greenlight go a Michael Hage in a hypothetical for a Dylan Cousins. Is that too aggressive for you? Is that deviating from the plan, as you alluded to earlier?
I'd have to think about that. Pierre always brings about some very thoughtful proposals, so it's
Yes.
best to not instantly react to them and kind of ponder. I think it could help the Canadiens in the short term, but Dylan Cousins is not used moderately in Buffalo. He's used quite a bit, and
Yeah.
like I was watching the two games against Buffalo this weekend, and on earlier in the week, and it's just really unfortunate to watch this two-way game and how it's deteriorated. And a lot of people will say, "Oh, well, he's playing in Buffalo. Look how well Jack Eichel and Sam Reinhart and Ryan O'Reilly looked when they left." And to that point, I agree. But let's also factor in that his best season was when Tage Thompson just exploded with 90 plus points, and he was fifth in scoring at 68 points that year, right? So like he was very much riding shotgun with all these guys that were producing very well. It's the year that Jeff Skinner came back to life. So I'm not to disrespect the player. I think he's a great workhorse. I think that he could be a passable second line center, but to give up Michael Hage and likely a first round pick with that,
Right.
that's not the kind of center that I would look at to do that, especially with the fact that he's got that $7.8 million attached to his contract for the next couple of years. Like, to me, that added risk is problematic. Now, if you have a situation like Josh Norris, who's on a similar contract and has risk on his own end, it makes sense to do a swap like that. But if you're the Montreal Canadiens, you're taking on all the risk, you're paying top dollar. I just don't see how you benefit from a situation like this other than banking on him possibly being able to replicate the season he had 3 years ago. And the Canadiens, have gotten burned in the past in terms of hoping that a play will find its form within their organization. Just not sold, because again, a guy like Dylan Cousins right now, first power play wave in Buffalo, very routinely next to Tage Thompson when possible. Some good wingers that he plays with as well, like JJ Peterka sometimes is quite, an awesome get. And obviously playing with guys like Coolidge and the like. So I like what he's doing, but again, I feel like the temptation is easy, but to let it go and allow this team to figure it out by itself, because they got themselves here. They for sure can get themselves over the finish line, especially as other teams around them start selling off.
Yeah, no doubt. That's Marco D'Amico. We have him for a few more minutes, kind enough to break away from his much-deserved vacation time. Don't forget, JP O'Connor will join us at 11:30. Dan Robertson, the voice of the Winnipeg Jets, will join us at 12 o'clock. And so keep the stream going. We'll go until about 1 o'clock today. We've got TSN and the Trade Breakers on in the background. Nice to see Bob McKenzie back in the mix on live TV again. And we're ready to go. So let me put you on the spot, Hotshot. David Savard, what's more valuable, in your opinion, at this juncture with the Canadiens? That Montreal takes a pick, second, third round pick for David Savard, or they hold on to David Savard for hopefully a push, a real stronger push to the playoffs. Of course, as we broadcast live today, Montreal is 1 point out. But really, if we think about it, it's actually 2 points out, because Montreal doesn't have the tiebreaker on anybody in front of them. So even though they're one, it's really two. What do you think about David Savard at this exact moment? More valuable to get something for him or keep him for the run to the 82nd and final game of the regular season?
It's
tricky, eh? It's tricky, man.
Yeah, you have to reach a threshold. It has to be more than just a second round pick. Like, it
But
has
is
to
he
be
worth more than that, though, Marco?
In this market, probably.
Yeah. Okay.
Like,
okay.
This is the thing I'm trying to say here. Like, you don't have to necessarily trade everybody. Like, I understand everybody would like to sell high on Joel Armia and David Savard and so on and so forth. And in most cases, they probably be right. But we're not dealing with a team of robots. We're dealing with a team of humans, and there's no better way to deflate and kill a culture than to be that aggressive. But again, because it doesn't send the same message. You just signed Jake Evans to then let go of everybody else doesn't make any sense. But, this is a big but, for example, a team that really wants David Savard is the Winnipeg Jets. If the Winnipeg Jets are willing to give a prospect of note or a second round pick plus, well, then you have to listen. In my honest opinion, you have to listen. If Joel Armia, it can net you a second round pick, you have to listen. Because as much as I like Joel Armia and Jake Evans on the PK, I feel like, and especially the way he plays, I feel like Jake Evans is a big part of that. Jake Evans has made anybody who plays with him on the fourth line that much better. So much so that people think it's the third line. To me, you just got to make sure that you know what you're doing. David Savard at this stage in his career is a third pair right shot defenseman. There's nothing that says the Canadiens can't turn around in the summer and sign him again as he wants to play in Montreal. But if you can get a prospect of note for him or more than just a second round pick, you have to use that venture because that's capital that's going to help you fill out your roster this summer. And I think that's far more important to the long-term vision of this team than simply just trying to make a last-ditch effort to finish 8th and face the Washington Capitals and more than likely get thumped in the first round. But then again, a lot of people will tell me what happened the last time that the Canadiens matched up against the number 1 seed Washington Capitals. So this is why nothing is for sure in life, but especially this version of the Washington Capitals, those 4 games are not worth derailing the long-term vision.
Seriously, how much longer do I have you for today? We got so many comments, Marco. It's crazy.
Give you 2-3 minutes.
Okay, perfect. So I want to ask you, do you want to tackle Rick Springhetti's comment here about whether or not you have fans will be disappointed? Because I don't think they will be. Or do you want me to ask you about Jake Evans? Take your pick.
Listen, I think we can do both. So first off, when
was
it comes
it a mistake
to
extend Jake Evans? Because
No.
look what centers are getting on the market today. It's crazy.
Even centers, never mind centers. Anthony Beauvillier just went for a second round pick.
Look at
what
that.
are we talking about here? So again, if Anthony Beauvillier can go for a second round pick, Joel Armia can go for a second round pick.
Agreed.
This is what I'm saying, right? So that kind of cost opportunity I would take if I were a general manager, because you have Joel Armia's replacement on the same line in Emil Heineman. Now find a player that could slot into the fourth line or third line. There's a lot of players on waivers right now that you can go and get without necessarily affecting what's going on in Laval. So that's a very interesting concept to me because the Canadiens aren't playing today. They can afford. And, that's why it's difficult for me to say Canadiens fans will be disappointed, because I didn't think the Canadiens were trading Arturi Lehkonen, who was traded in the last hour of the trade deadline in 2022. And they did, right? Because they got an offer they couldn't at the time refuse, which is working out for both teams so far. I'm the same way when it comes to this. I think the Canadiens, if they can, will make a trade, but I also believe that the Canadiens are very aware that they can't trade everybody. And because then that really kind of sends the wrong message. To me personally, what I would tell the players is I got to trade these guys. And I agree with facts sakes, I would trade Savard and Armia.
It's a great name.
Personally, it's a great name. That's why I had to slowly say it.
Good man. Good man.
It's a great, tipping point, because people will be like, oh, they have enough picks. They're not picking players with these picks. They're going to flip them for assets. They're going to make the big deal in the summer when things are going to be a little bit more fluid and prices aren't going to be overly inflated. And I think that's the key, right? If you look at a guy, for example, like Alex Carrier, if Alex Carrier were traded right now, he'd be traded for a first round pick plus.
Yeah.
But the Canadiens got him for Justin Barron. So see how the prices have fluctuated in a really aggressive way. There is a level of desperation right now that you won't necessarily see in the summer. Not as much anyway. And I think that's what you need to take into consideration. Now, I was adamant about this. I reported about this. I was straightforward about this.
Yeah.
In this market, the Montreal Canadiens could have gotten a first round pick for Jake Evans. My opinion.
And there's no way, obviously, here. Somebody brought this up earlier. It was seeing what the market's turned into. Now it's time to trade Jake Evans. Just pull the rug out from underneath him after he just signed for 4 years. That's not happening.
And then you will never, ever, 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 ever
Correct.
have any free agent signing here ever again.
Yeah. So we're following this this trade, brother. It looks like the Sens are really
Yeah,
working on this
it's
deal.
I've
It's coming
been
together, it looks like here.
I've been sent a message just now where I
Yeah.
was
Yeah.
basically given the thumbs up on this being the
Yeah.
case. And good for the Senators, but the key with the Senators is he is going to have a very different role, Cousins is, than what Stützle currently has on the team. And I think that's the biggest difference, is that this helps them,
Yeah.
balance things out two-way. But for the Montreal Canadiens, with a guy like Nick Suzuki, I really do feel like you need an offensive-minded left shot second line center. And I think that's where I don't think Dylan Cousins necessarily is the fit,
Yes.
because I think Dylan Cousins on the Senators is not going to be. Maybe he hits 60 points. That's the way I see it.
Interesting perspective. I wish we can expand more on it, but you gave us more time than we originally planned for. I don't want your wife, I don't want you coming home single. So get back to the beach, enjoy the
Or
holiday.
dead.
That would be worse. That would, just so we're clear, that would be worse. I don't want this to be a Dateline episode where I got to go speak to Keith Morrison. Marco D'Amico, brother, thanks as always. I don't think, because the traveling nonsense, maybe we can hook up Monday or something, but whatever. Enjoy the rest of your vacation, and we'll catch up real soon on the channel.
Sounds good. Enjoy the day, guys.
Yeah, there he goes. Marco D'Amico, kind enough to join us from his little holiday break. Welcome back to the Shaun Starr Show. All eyes on NHL trade deadline day, 3:00 this afternoon. Thank you so much for being with us. It's really our first kind of live show. As you can see, my dog is look, my dog is not really stimulated by what's going on here today. So keep it locked to the channel. I'm going to be with you until about 1:00. But obviously, if the Montreal Canadiens make some sort of massive move, and I don't think they will. We're going to have blanket coverage of this as we wait for what could be massive news with the Ottawa Senators working on a deal for Dylan Cousins. I've got TSN and the Trade Breakers on in the background. I got my dog to my right here. I got my old dog memorialized on the channel today, and we've got lots of your comments today. We've reached over 200 live viewers 22 minutes into our live stream on a special show today, as we wonder in the aftermath of the Montreal Canadiens coming up a goal short thanks to a 3-2 loss in Edmonton, snapping the Canadiens' 5-game winning streak. They move on to Calgary. The Flames are reeling. They've only won 3 of their last 10 games. They're coming off an overtime loss to Jason Robertson and the Dallas Stars. Speaking of Dallas, fascinating stuff to see what kind of unearthed over the course of the early morning hours today. We're around 2:00 Eastern Standard Time in the AM. Elliot Friedman of Sportsnet suggested that the framework of a potential deal between Carolina and Mikko Rantanen and the Dallas Stars was more or less being put together. And then as the hours moved on, as the day grew older, it turned out that no, there is no framework. It doesn't appear that the Dallas Stars and Carolina Hurricanes will be working on a Mikko Rantanen exchange. It appeared that maybe Landon Stankoven was speculated as the return in that deal. That obviously doesn't appear to be happening, but who knows? So lots of posturing at this point. I love NHL trade deadline today because of how general managers tend to operate as they go through feeding information to insiders, and then insiders relay that information to the public. And then there's various tactics and strategies at play here. So we've got lots to get to. JP O'Connor will be on the channel in about 10 minutes as we talk about the Montreal Canadiens and things we've seen and what we think is going to happen, because there's been a few good comments today as I look through about, you see here, like our pal Peter Puck talking about, I won't be disappointed, I'm here for the fun, as some people have suggested that they have dangerously perhaps gotten their hopes up for a move involving the Montreal Canadiens and their general manager and VP, Jeff Gorton and Ken Hughes, seeing if they can find a way to help this team out. And this is where, I think we can agree that the Canadiens are in a little bit of a sticky situation. And by that, I mean, they challenged the leadership group to go out and win some hockey games. They challenged the leadership group to, oh, you don't want us to liquidate? You don't want your friends to be traded? Go out there and win some games. And the Montreal Canadiens, prior to running into Edmonton last night, had won every game out of the Four Nations break, to the point where they were more or less buried in the Eastern Conference playoff race, and now here they are just 1 point out from catching the second wild card team, but that would only mean catching them because the Canadiens don't have the tie-breaking edge over these teams that we're talking about, whether it's Detroit or whether it's Ottawa or Columbus, looking at the wild card races with those top two teams, as Montreal basically is 2 points out from that second wild card because, again, we can't get back into the tie-breaking situation. So keeping our eyes open for the possibility of Dylan Cousins and the Ottawa Senators getting going, because it looks as though that, yes, we are starting to see it come in now. The Capitals have added a second-round pick to Pittsburgh for Anthony Beauvillier, as Chris Johnson from TSN mentioned that. Also looking at the possibilities of what the heck is going on in Boston. Brad Marchand on the trade block as the Bruins and their captain are talking about options in Boston, with the possibility that the Bruins captain could find his way back to the Western Conference. But the door to Colorado, because again, everybody, whether it's Sidney Crosby and the pipe dream of him going to Colorado to play with his Cole Harbour brother and Nathan McKinnon, that door closed with the addition of Brock Nelson yesterday. I think that door also closed for Brad Marchand to go to Colorado. But it seems as though that insiders are telling us that the Boston Bruins are more or less looking at a kind of a retool reset on the fly, because Boston was 64 points and they have 18 games to go. The Canadiens have 66 points with 20 games left. The exact same scenario that the Detroit Red Wings are in. 20 games, 66 points. The New York Islanders, obviously we just finished talking about Brock Nelson. So if we've been watching our channel together, talking about the various possibilities that the Montreal Canadiens were facing. And we asked this question out loud last week. Pick a lane, Lou Lamoriello. Pick a lane, New York Islanders. Who are you? What do you want to do? Because I believe the New York Islanders are one of those classic teams that look at their roster and say, man, we're really good. And when in reality, you're kind of average. So pick a lane, decide who you want to be, and ultimately commit to the bit. And that's why we looked at names like Noah Dobson as a very attractive option to the Montreal Canadiens. But, as we were talking moments ago with Marco D'Amico, it's a tough spot, and I'll tell you right now, I could not run an NHL team. As talented as I believe I am, as smart as I think I am occasionally, I do not have the mental faculties to be a general manager in the National Hockey League. End of sentence. I wouldn't know what to do right now. Full stop. I wouldn't know what to do. When we talk about where the market is at, when we look at the value of a Jake Evans, man, I really do believe the Canadiens could have got a major haul for Jake Evans, because the void at center really is a void. There's not enough talent that teams are comfortable getting. And then we talk about the specialist that Jake Evans is. And I didn't think Evans had the best game in Edmonton yesterday, but whatever. I'll be curious to get JP O'Connor's kind of opinion and point of view on that, because JP was behind the microphone on TSN 690 on Thursday night, watching that game and watching the Edmonton Oilers finish off Montreal in overtime. Man, and they had their chances. Cole Caulfield in overtime. Cole Caulfield, by the way, on a 4-game goal streak. He's on 31 goals. Yoel Armia from a great feed from Lane Hutson in that 3-2 game last night. And I'm very curious. I want to talk about Lane Hutson with JP O'Connor because I'll tell you, 48 puts a smile on the face of a lot of different people. And you know what made me so happy about Lane Hutson yesterday was the fact that when he carries the puck past the neutral zone, no one's on him. And I've spent the majority of my life watching Montreal Canadian players access the neutral zone, get close to the offensive zone, and they dump it in, and they dump it in. Go win a foot race, go win a board battle, and see if you can come up with the puck. To watch Lane Hutson gain entry into the offensive zone without having to freaking dump the puck in was a breath of fresh air. And boom, timing is everything. Lane Hutson electrifying on that Yoel Armia goal in the slot. The man who helped call it was Sean Campbell on TSN 690. The boys sounded great. JP O'Connor, welcome to the Shaun Starr Show. What's up, brother?
How are you, man? Thanks for having me in.
No, dude, thank you so much for being a part of the channel today. We're well over 200 live viewers, so we have a little bit. Are you good with pressure, JP? Can you perform under pressure? Because we're at 220 now. So get ready, brother.
It's ramping up, man. It's ramping up. Let's get after it.
People are interested in what you have to say. So I was just glowing about Laine Hutson. I love the fact that 48 carried the puck past the neutral zone, said, hey, no one's around me. I am not going to ring it around the boards. Instead, playmakers make plays, sets up Yoel Armia. I mean, obviously we're blown away by Laine Hutson, but yeah, I'm starting to see small doses of leadership. Walk me through what you observe with Laine Hutson so far.
Well, there's a couple of things early, Shaun, because you look at Hutson, at the beginning of the season, and there was that the thing that jumped out at me was the willingness to challenge guys, right? It was the understanding that he had that skill set, that he could beat you with his feet, he could beat you with his head, and he was going to do it. It didn't matter if he was 2 or 3 games into his career, or if he's going to be 15 games. I'm going to take you on. And that's what jumps out at you right away. And there's always going to be that learning curve, right? But I do think that he's tackled it rather well. And I think the play that you're talking about last night really exemplified what we're talking about. He played a little possum, didn't he? He came up the ice and as everybody's kind of looking over their shoulder, understanding that Montreal is going for a change, you kind of let your guard down a little bit, and there he goes into the corner, waits, and God, Edmonton just sleeping as Armia slides into the slot and lets one rip for the goal. But it's just a heads up play by a kid who's clearly really feeling comfortable about himself and comfortable within what the Canadiens are trying to do.
So obviously Montreal has their 5-game winning streak come to an end. How does something like that occur, JP, where how the team looked going into the Four Nations break and how they corrected themselves post Four Nations break? How come they couldn't make that correction? If they knew they were limping to the finish line, how come there was no self-correct? How come they needed a break to look as good as they did? How does that work?
I've been in it. I've been in those locker rooms where things seem to be spiraling out of control. And excuse me.
No worries, bro.
You do understand what it is. There's a belief that if there's a collective effort to get on the same page, you should be able to get out of it. But it's one of those things that you just can't put your finger on. And when you go away for a little while, Shaun, and you look at it, you're able to kind of bring the helicopter up and really get a good visual on what's going on. A little bit of desperation is not a bad thing at times, is it? No. And the Canadiens can slowly but surely see that season slipping away. And for a lot of guys in that locker room now, they're looking at it and going, I don't want to be done this early again. There's maybe the understanding you're not going to make it or go on a long run, but you don't want to be done that early. And I think that the solutions have been quite easy. You've seen guys content and committed to reload above the puck. You've seen a lot more calm plays and heads up plays in the defensive zone rather than some of that kind of fire drill stuff that we saw early on in the season, and then during the skid again it kind of popped its ugly head up, didn't it? So it's so difficult to put your finger on it, because if you could, then everybody could fix it. But I do think that desperation comes into it a little bit.
Yeah, it's interesting too. So what's your thought process on the management going to leadership and saying, hey, you don't want me to trade your friends? Win me some games. They win 5-0 and they take a point in Edmonton, right?
Yeah.
Before you jumped on, I did a little bit of a confessional. I will admit to you right now, I am not capable enough to be a general manager of an NHL team. I can't do it. I would not know what to do today, because I think I have signer's regret when I see the fact that people are going crazy. Anthony Beauvillier going for a first. Jake Evans, I think, could have got a first and plus maybe something or other, but he's a core member of this team. I'm sure the organization has no regrets. But how do you strike that balance of, you put a challenge at the feet of the players, they took on that challenge, and I think they won that challenge, and now they're a point out of a playoff spot and they don't have a second line. How do you balance not deviating from the plan while also keeping your team in the fight?
you don't, as a general manager, and I'm not a general manager, but I mean, I've been around long enough and I've spoken to enough guys to know that as much as you're trying to make your group happy, you're trying to keep this group content, you don't really owe them anything, right? You don't owe them anything. So if Kent Hughes gets an opportunity today and somebody comes up because it's getting a little bit tight and they feel like they might miss their window and they're going to overpay for David Savard or they're going to overpay for Yoel Armia, sorry guys, but that is going to be the move that that Kent Hughes has to make, because it's going to be for the long-term betterment of the team. I really believe that, and I think that's the way that managers have to look at it, because if you are so nearsighted or so emotionally attached and locked into your group, if you're not able to detach, then those decisions that you're making, they're not going to work out. They might look great very early, but I can't imagine that they're going to look good down the road.
No. And so with that in mind, it's off to Calgary Saturday night at 7 live on TSN 690. The Calgary Flames, they're still in a wild card race, obviously 1 point up on Vancouver. So massive game tomorrow night. Huge. What's your thoughts behind a couple of players here? Patrick Laine is really now a specialist. I've been talking for a few weeks. His numbers at 5-on-5 aren't very good. His pace has been an issue since he was brought back. And then we can talk about Owen Beck, 7 minutes, 9 minutes, 8 minutes in Edmonton last night. Do the Canadiens have to make a move just so Beck can go back to Laval and do his thing? Because again, I'll repeat what I had said to you before. JP, they don't have a second line, and they're a point out of a playoff race here. So what's going on?
Yeah, I was thinking about it with Beck last night, because I was keeping a close eye on the numbers, Shaun, in terms of his ice time, and it looked like there was going to be a little bit more, maybe in the kind of 11 to 12 minute mark, and then as things got a little bit tighter, you could see he wasn't coming back over the boards, and I think, if I take a fast look there, it ended up at 8:22 last night. So it really isn't a whole lot, maybe a little bit more than it was against Buffalo. But I don't think necessarily that's an indication of the play, but I do think it's an indication of the will of the coaching staff to see if they can get this team over the line. And if it means that Owen Beck has to sit, then okay, then you're going to have to sit. That's just part of the process. But I'm with you on Laine. Laine to me is, when he's at his best, boy, is that light ever bright. And then and then when you see him, cruising around or losing pucks softly along the boards, he can be a real head scratcher. So I don't think, Shaun, that the answer here is to go out and get something. I don't, because I don't know that. You're going to bring enough back to merit that kind of move. I really don't. But again, it all depends, right, on the overpay, right? If somebody is getting desperate, let's just look down to 401 right now, right? If the Leafs are starting to feel like they're missing out, and all of a sudden teams are starting to ramp up and they are not getting theirs.
Yeah.
They got to start looking, and I don't doubt that Tree Living is experienced and understands what he's doing, but push comes to shove, he's going to try and help his team out, and if there's an overpay out there, you got to listen.
Yeah, I totally believe that. If I would want my manager, if I were a fan of a team that had a window of opportunity that was open. And who knows, man? You never know. And I love general managers like Julien Brisebois. I want a team filled with talented players. I don't pick schmicks. I don't care. And maybe the Canadiens will get there one day. But what about the value? There's been so much discussed about the value of a guy like David Savard. And it appears, and we're gonna have Dan Robertson on in about half an hour, the voice of the Jets. And the Jets are, by all accounts, consistently in hot pursuit of David Savard. What goes through your mind when I ask you about David Savard, member of the Canadiens, and his value? David Savard gets moved to Winnipeg for, I don't know, a second-round pick or third-round pick and a prospect. How would that make you feel as a teammate, understanding that it's a business, but again, this team is in the fight?
If I'm being an honest teammate,
yeah,
I got no problem with it. if David Savard is leaving and Alex Carrier isn't there and I'm a teammate, I'm pissed off.
Yeah. Okay.
I'm pissed off. And that would be the differentiator for me, because I think Alex Carrier has come in and done some really impressive work for the Canadiens. I think, right before the holidays when that deal happens and you're scratching your head, okay, Barron's out, and maybe give up on him a little bit and feel like you're getting a better move. Great. But I wasn't expecting this kind of result out of Carrier. I really wasn't. And you heard coming back that, he was probably going to be the guy who's replacing David Savard. Well, I happen to think he's done it, and in spades. Now, I'm a big David Savard fan, and I appreciate the job that he does, and I know a lot of teams appreciate the job that he does, which is why he's always in demand. In the last year of the deal, it's why Tampa Bay and Julien Brisebois went out and got him from Columbus, and you bag a Stanley Cup. That guy does those intangibles, and he is not going to get rattled. Where I have some concern now, though, and this is something that is Father Time catches up. Amen. And I looked at David Savard in the last couple of games, and the job is getting done, but the things are only going to speed up, Shaun. They are only speeding up. They are only getting harder. So if you're going to bring David Savard in and be a third pair guy, be a specialist, have him out there for 11 or 12 minutes, go for it. Let her rip, because he will not hurt. But if Dan Robertson comes on and says we need him to play in the two pair, and he's going to be relied upon for 15, 16 minutes a night for hopefully a long run for Winnipeg, I don't know. I don't know if that's the move to make.
Are you surprised the Canadiens are this competitive this deep into the season? 66 points, 1 out from a playoff, 20 games to go. Like I really wanted to. I've been really consistent. Whatever people thought about the playoffs, what I wanted really that I thought was achievable was games that mattered with some pressure later in the season. And obviously with 20 games to go, we are deep into the season. Yeah. And they're playing with pressure. Cole Caulfield, 4-game goal streak. Lane Hutson, 6-game point streak. Chris Knobloch called the Canadiens top line one of the best lines in hockey. End of sentence. So how surprised are you, JP? The Canadiens are where they are in this competitive window here in the East now.
I think I'm more surprised because of the, I hesitate to use this word, but because of the failings of Doc down the middle.
Huh.
So I thought that if Kirby Doc was able to come out, and by the way, from word go when he came back, I felt very confident that he was not going to be flying out of the gate, because that knee injury is not something that you come back from and explode out of the gate. It takes a little while. It just does, right? I've had it, and it's just it'll come, but not right away.
Right.
So it was slow coming, and then all of a sudden things started to look a little bit better, a little bit more comfortable. Next thing you know, he's going down again. Right. And so for that reason, I just felt like, okay, there's that big gap down the middle again, and I don't know if they're going to be able to punch every single night. Where I've been most impressed, and I think this is why they're still in it, is there's been some serious flexes by the best players, some serious flexes, and I'll match you on Caulfield. Caulfield is taking his game to a completely different level, and not just because he's hit the 30 goal mark. Absolutely not. Our listeners on 690, they hear me bark about this all the time, and I'm sure they're sick and tired of it. But Cole Caulfield's defensive commitment, he must be skating around the ice. And I don't know if I can swear on this channel. But
yes, you can.
He must be saying to himself at times, holy shit, this is working. Holy moly. I've heard this my whole life, that I've got to get back, and that I've got to pitch in, and I've got to do this. And believe us, Cole, offense will be generated from this. And he's looked at it and said, no way.
Right.
You're seeing it. He's taking runs at Owen Power. You don't need him to be blowing guys up. That's not the point. But when you see him first back, when you see him reloading above the puck, when you see him committing to it, and then offensive stuff is coming out of it, you got to be really impressed. And the fact that he's able to continue on bagging goals at this rate is really, I think it's terrific. We knew that Suzuki was a stud and maybe a little bit understated in his approach, But if you can't look at Suzuki right now and be impressed at the steps that he's taken, then I don't know what games you're watching. So you see this morning that Goolie's back in the ice. I don't know what's going to come of that. I'm sure it's not as close as we think. But you've got some of those guys who are going to be important players down the line, and if you keep getting these flexes out of Caulfield and Suzuki, I'm impressed, and I think that they'll be in it. They might not get it over the line, but they're going to be in it for a while.
Would you make a move then? Like everything you say, you just finished saying, and everything you said made sense in my brain. I don't have an argument. I'm like, JP's out to lunch. I don't know how can we have that opinion and not at least JP look at the waiver wire to get somebody in there that can play. I don't know if Owen Beck's playing anywhere on average between 8 to 9 minutes per game. Somebody that could play 14 to 17 minutes a night. Certainly that's something that Ken Hughes has to be looking at, right?
Oh, sure. That's fine. But does that mean it has to be done now? I mean, guys can get waived, right? I mean, it's
Yep.
So like if you're going to bully your way into or try and bully your way into something, you're probably going to come out on the wrong side of it. So as much as I appreciate what you're saying, and I know that Habs fans are passionate, I get it. If it was me, I would sit back and say, hey, this is our group. If I get something for Armia, if I get something for Savard, I'm listening. If Dvorak, who I think he's in play. Well, I know he's in play, but I just mean as teams start to realize that their avenues are getting shut down, that they could still look at a guy like Dvorak and say, okay, we're going to grab that. If I'm getting that stuff, I'm fine with it, but I'm not going to go out. I'm not going to barge my way around and get caught, because I think that the Canadiens are okay right now. They have checked the boxes of what they want to do. And for 20 more games, I think they've got a puncher's chance. So I'm good. I'm looking at that team and saying, you guys have done enough. I'm not going out to get anything, but hey, let her rip, guys, and let's see what we can do.
So I've got TSN on here in the confines of the home studio here.
Yep.
I see Mike Johnson, Craig Button, and James Duthie are playing Plinko, on TSN right now.
Yeah.
So, what would you say to the Habs fan here as Rick Springhetti jumps in the chat? We got so many comments. Hab fans will be disappointed. They don't see a solid second line center. So forget about the player, right? What would you say to the Canadiens fan that says, JP, man, I'm disappointed. My team didn't do anything at the deadline. It came and went, and my team is the same as it was that went into the deadline. What would you say to that person?
Yeah, I don't want to drag the business side of it in, because whenever you are talking about a passionate fan, they're not looking at the business side, right? They're looking at the emotional side of it, or they're feeling the emotional side of it. They're thinking about the pie in the sky stuff, and that's okay. It's fine. I don't have a problem with it, but I just don't think that it's realistic. And as much as you don't want to be a wet blanket to fans, I think that the explanation is pretty easy. They've gone out and they've done as they've said that they wanted to do, as you mentioned earlier, be in the mix, play meaningful games, so on and so forth. And we're going to let them do it. And we know that when Demidov shows up and when David Reinbacher slots into the lineup and when our group is coming, and the fact that we have 2 firsts and we got 3 seconds and we got all this stuff, we know that we're going to be able to do something. Just because it's a deadline doesn't mean that we're not in it, doesn't mean that we're not ready to throw a punch. It just might not be right now.
How awesome is this news? Caden Gooley skating in Brossard today.
Yeah, it's awesome.
It's incredible. I mean, I don't want to speculate. I don't know if he's going to come back or what, but this is great news. Great news that he's skating today in Brossard. That report is confirmed, so I'm comfortable moving forward here. Connor asked me this question on the morning show today, we got a question from a listener when we did our Ask Us Anything at 9:30. No, there's no Andrei Markov worry about injury-prone guy, right? Like I don't think when I think of Markov, I'm 46 years old. Markov is the best defenseman I've seen wear a Canadiens uniform. Yeah. Okay, I didn't grow up in the big 3 era of Savard, Lapointe, and Robinson.
No, of course not.
So that's what I think of when I think of 79. Great defenseman with the Montreal Canadiens. From your perspective, as the analyst perspective, any concern with Gooley's injury history?
I think you have to take it into consideration because it's
Yeah.
it's just fact, isn't it? It just is.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, and the the concussions is one thing, right? And there's some catastrophic stuff you're just not going to avoid, and there's some freak stuff that you're just not going to avoid. So he's had the concussions, he's had the weird ones, right? He's had this cut. It's just, I mean, who could ever have predicted this? This is crazy stuff. But I do think that you have to look at it, Shaun. It's just being realistic. If a guy is not able to finish off seasons, then you wonder. You also have to appreciate the fact that he's a big, strapping, aggressive kid who was going to play a certain style, and injuries are going to be a part of it. You just hope that after coming back from this oddball one, that he can get not 82, but that he can get 70 plus games under his belt and really start to contribute in the way that we've seen him, because that is between him eating up those types of minutes and Reinbach, who's going to come in and do something very similar, I think. That is a pretty impressive, whether you pair them together or not, I don't know, but that is an impressive, what I consider it to be a two pair.
With JP O'Connor, our Montreal Canadiens analyst on TSN 690, you heard him on the call with the Canadiens picking up a point in Edmonton, losing with 7 seconds to go in OT in a 3-2 final. Cole Caulfield, Yoel Armia scoring, Sam Montembeault, 29 saves. Montreal 1 point out of a playoff spot. No major moves yet. Anthony Beauvillier goes to Pittsburgh for a second-round pick there.
Looks like things are getting pretty close in Ottawa, though, if I'm reading that one right.
So, walk me through your initial reaction. It's not done yet, but it appears Josh Norris could be a huge piece going the other way for Buffalo's Dylan Cousins. Darren Dreger told us on the morning show today that he spoke with Kevin Adams and named Kevin Adams as his source, the GM in Buffalo, saying, I don't want picks. I want players. If I'm going to trade for you, I want you in my lineup on Saturday. So I don't think that put the Canadiens in the Dylan Cousins business personally.
No.
So what about Ottawa getting Cousins to play behind Tim Stützle? What's your reaction to that possibly here?
I happen to think that this is a good hockey deal if it does in fact get done, because Cousins to me looks like a guy who has signed a good deal for him, right? It's 7.1. I think he'll be there for at least I think it was a 7-year deal that he signed. So I think he's in year 2 of it, and I like Cousins a lot. I think he has to be slotted correctly, and I think he can slot in there in the 2-hole. But it looked to me like a guy who needed a change, just needed a change of air, and he didn't look overly interested to me. And I can understand that. You get to that point in Buffalo where, could you imagine a guy like Tuck coming over from Vegas? He goes 4 consecutive years, and then he's sitting and he's the hometown hero. He comes back and says, hey, I'm from Syracuse. I want to play in Buffalo. And you go 4 in a row now with no playoffs. I mean, he must be at wit's end, right?
Yeah.
Now, you talked earlier, Shaun, about injury. Now, this is something that you got to take into consideration if you're Kevin Adams, because Josh Norris is damaged goods. He is damaged goods. I love Josh Norris. I watched him when he was in Belleville very early. I knew he wasn't going to be there very long. But as a key component coming over in the Erik Karlsson deal, you look at that guy and you go, holy moly, talented. My God, he can't keep his shoulder in. His shoulder is, it's made out of papier-mâché at this point, right? It's junk. It's worse than my shoulder. And if I'm Kevin Adams, you got to take a swing, I suppose, because it's going to be money in, kind of money out. But if Josh Norris cannot stay healthy, boy, this is going to be another one, because you slot Dylan Cousins correctly and get a little energy back into his game, and he could be a difference maker in Ottawa.
No kidding. Cousins, Norris, JBD may be involved here. So it's interesting to do when we talk about the injury history with Josh Norris. Now, clearly, I'm going to guess logically here, you think higher of Norris than you do of Kirby Dach. I'm curious what you think Kirby Dach's value. I know that he's got 1 year left and then he's an RFA. So the Canadiens have all the leverage in the world on Kirby Dach moving forward. But do you think there are general managers in the league that look at him with loving eyes and say, "Oh, I can get this player. I can get him to work," or is the sample size too big now to to have that fantasy.
I think the kicker in your question is RFA or UFA. If he's an RFA, yeah, I got you.
Yeah.
I'm listening. If he's a UFA, nope. And that's just the way that I would look at it as a manager, because I don't think that he is in. I don't think he's in a great bargaining position. He's certainly not in a good bargaining position as an RFA with what's happened to him, but I don't think he'd be in a good position as a UFA either. But the fact that he's got that R after the deal, I think that that you could do something there. But I still have time for Doc. I really do. I think that there is more there, and in the same way, Shaun, maybe not exactly the same dynamic, but I felt this way about Emil Heineman. I looked at Heineman and I thought, now there's a guy who's gotten bumped from Florida to Calgary to Montreal. He's got some injuries. He's got this. Can we just give this guy a little bit of stability and then let him get his feet underneath and let's see what he can do? I kind of feel that way about Doc still. He's further along in the process, no question, and he's got to get it going. But I still feel like there is more there to Doc.
Hey, listen, we're over 300 live views, bro. You brought 100 new people to the channel. It must be your dashing good looks.
It's my flex. I'm telling you. It's either that or the fact that I got a Bouvillier jersey on. That maybe that's what it is that did it right there. How about that?
Wait a minute.
I jinxed them this morning.
Could I do this here? Are you ready for this? I'm going to add someone. I'm going to add a big. People have been waiting for this guy today.
Hit it.
There he is. There he is.
There he is.
Look at this guy. Look at this freaking Dan Robertson.
You talk about flex. Look at that guy.
How you doing, guys?
Do you guys know each other?
We may have met once or twice. Yes.
Yeah. Oh, I love this. JP, brother, great stuff as always. Thank you so much.
Pleasure.
Welcome to the channel. I'm so glad you took some time away from the family and the kids to make it happen today.
Thanks for the ask. Really appreciate it. Dan, always a pleasure to see you, my friend.
I love the hat. Keep it on, brother. It looks good.
Yeah. It's always styling, bro. All right. Take care. Bye. There he goes, JP O'Connor. Don't forget Montreal Canadiens action, Calgary tomorrow. Thank goodness Connor McDavid doesn't play for the Calgary Flames. He'd be so bothered if the visiting team comes to his rink and they have to adjust what time they play. Dan Robertson, good to see you, brother. How's it going?
You too, Shauna. Now, is that the late Leon over your right shoulder?
That is. There he is. There.
That's beautiful.
That's my big boy.
Yeah.
And so yeah, I like to take him kind of. I'm in my living room today. Normally, I have like an office, and but I got TSN, the big screen on the living room television, waiting to see because they've been playing Plinko for like 20 minutes.
Yeah, I can only imagine what it's like to be on that set all day long. I'm actually in New Jersey at the West End, kind of waiting to see what shakes out, and we'll go jump on the bus a little after 4, get the police escort to the game, and then see what the Jets look like. I'll be interested. It's going to be a fascinating couple of hours.
So, obviously, the Winnipeg Jets. No, I thought maybe a trade happened. The Winnipeg Jets, David Savard story's not going away. Darren Dreger brought it back to the forefront on the morning show with Connor McKenna and yours truly today. So obviously, Dan is the play-by-play voice on TSN for the Winnipeg Jets. When you look at the window of opportunity, and Winnipeg has a chance to win the Stanley Cup this year, is David Savard perhaps a missing piece to round this team out?
If so, it would be on the fringe, I think, Shaun. A depth piece. It wouldn't hurt. I don't know what I would give to get him. Nothing, certainly. Maybe a third round pick, that sort of thing. If you look at it on their third pairing right now, it's not the best, but a lot of teams can say that. Colin Miller's on the right side mostly. They switch things up once in a while. They'll put Hayden Fleury in and put Logan Stanley over there. But Miller's kind of the de facto third pairing right shot guy. Now, is David Savard better than Colin Miller? Well, probably. He's different. He's a better penalty killer. It's funny that you would ask me this question because we were talking about it. We bussed from Philly to New Jersey last night, and Kevin Sawyer, who does color with me, and I were actually talking about David Savard. And then I texted a few guys that we both know who follow the Canadiens, and they said, well, maybe he's a little slow of foot. And I know speed's never been his forte, but I think as a number 6, number 7 guy, it might work if it was the right price, but it's not going to win you a Stanley Cup, with all due respect to David Savard, who does have a lot of experience, and there's a lot to like about his game, but he's not the fastest guy on the planet now.
Recliner Sports, Nova Scotia in the house. The Rod Langway fan club, legendary Habs play-by-play, Dan the Man Robertson. Dan looks great, even brought in the cannons today. Welcome back to Montreal. Looking good, Dan. I mean, Dan, are you aware how beloved you are? The connection you built up with a certain portion of the fan base through the magic of terrestrial radio. Are you totally aware, seriously? It's a serious question.
Well, it's pretty nice. I'll say this, Shaun. After Christmas, I did 2 Canadiens games. You and I chatted about that a little bit.
Yeah.
And on TV in Florida. And, I tweeted that I'd be in for Brian Mudryk for a couple of games. And on X, I got some really nice response. And that's not a boast. It's just true. And I just say it because it means a lot to me. So it's, obviously the broadcasts are in great hands now with Victor, and obviously Brian does a great job too. It's just really nice to get that. I was there 8 years, and Montreal is still a big part of my life. And I listen to you guys every morning. Like, that's not kissing up, and then I listen all day, right? And
right.
Yeah, it's nice to know that people haven't forgot that I was there, and certainly a big place in my heart in that city.
Oh, sure. I mean, it's a testament to the caliber of work that you did. I could definitely could say that. So when we talked about David Savard, obviously, and the ongoing connection between him perhaps landing in Winnipeg. What can you tell us about the Jets here? I don't know. I personally think they're the best shot for Canada to win a Stanley Cup this year. My own opinion, ahead of the Edmonton Oilers today. But what's their strategy? Like, how aggressive do you think Kevin Cheveldayoff would be willing to go to fill whatever areas that he thinks are kind of weak and need to be rounded out? Is everything up for debate here?
I'd have to think so, Shaun, just based on the last few years. He is always, if not ultra aggressive, pretty darn close to it. You go back a number of years, and he brought Stastny into the mix. Now that's back in, I guess it was 2018, when they actually made a run. Were one of the best teams in the league, got to the semifinal. Last year, he got Sean Monahan, as we all know, and he went after Tyler Toffoli and got him. He got that work done a little bit earlier than compared to where we are today. It probably stung that they didn't get Brock Nelson, and I would think that Chevy probably offered, and this is just me guessing, as much or more than the Islanders offered. The Avalanche offered the Islanders.
Right.
I don't know much about Callum Ritchie, who was obviously the big prospect going the other way, but I would think that stung. I mean, he would have fit the bill in so many ways for the Jets. So, but he's always. I had asked Chevy this, like we always have like a mid-season interview for a pregame, and I said, based on where you are right now, will you be more aggressive? He said, I'm always aggressive, and he is. So look, they need to make a move. If you look at what Colorado has done, and they always seem to do, that's pretty significant. And Dallas is coming, right? And I know the Jets leapt out to a great lead, and they've been tremendous all year long. But it's almost, to me, it's like 2 seasons, right? It's before the trade deadline, and then what does your team look after the trade deadline is over? So he'll get something done. I don't know what it'll be. Obviously, when, supply and demand, when a guy like Nelson goes off the board, then other guys who are available, in theory, maybe the asking price goes a little bit higher. So, but just to answer your question, look, if not now, if you don't roll the dice now, then when do you do it? With all these terrific players in their prime, I mean, Scheifele and
that's it.
And Connor and Hellebuck and Morrissey and Velarde's getting there, and Adam Lowry's a terrific third line center. Like, they have to do it now, or they never will.
Well, so that's the positive side of the coin. What about the chances of anybody can be beaten? I mean, the Boston Bruins rewrote history a few seasons ago. What happened to them? The Tampa Bay Lightning got bounced in the first round by Columbus when they were in the midst of their championship run. So what can you see happening if I ask you the other side of that coin? The pressure on Connor Hellebuck to win these big games. He's going to win another Vezina. Nikolai Ehlers staring down the barrel of a UFA. Kyle Connor, who didn't have the best Four Nations. He's got to score for them. So, like, what if it doesn't go great? What if I ask you, Winnipeg doesn't get out of the second round? What could you see potentially happening there?
Well, you mentioned Ehlers. He'll be an unrestricted free agent at the end of the year.
That's my guy, Dan. That's my guy. I want Ehlers in Montreal.
He is
That's my guy.
electric. And just to go back a little bit, I used to call Halifax Mooseheads games, and Nikolai, I think in my last year before I went to Montreal,
Exactly.
was his year there. And he played a lot with Timo Meier, who he'll play against tonight. He's a fascinating player. I mean, he's a treat to watch. He's different. He's a game breaker, and he can, break down 2-3 guys, that sort of thing. I don't know where he'll go, but just to kind of look at it, that's the question right now. I mean, they could go 82-0, and people would think, well, okay, look to last year when they won the first game and then lost the next 4 against Colorado. So everything will be based on the playoffs, as it should be. There's, Cheveldayoff's the only general manager they've known. I know you're not suggesting this, but if they don't get any further than, maybe the second round, would his job be in jeopardy? I would certainly say no. But it's almost, all year long, just kind of gauging the fan reaction. It's been a cautious optimism. It's sort of like, show me what happens when the playoffs come. And the big question is, mentally, at least for me, can Hellebuyck have a strong first round? I certainly think he will. I mean, this guy is nails, but when you go back to last year, it was really devastating for him and the Jets, how many goals they gave up in round 1 against Colorado. So I would, what would be a success? Anything maybe less than the league semifinal might be deemed, I don't want to say a failure, but things are so tight. I'm not making any excuses for them. If you look at the Central Division, it's so friggin' strong, right? I mean, the Stars are coming along. Colorado, you can never count them out.
Yeah.
And who knows after that? So those 3 teams, there's not a lot to choose between the 2. And actually, Dallas will be in Winnipeg a week from today, and I'm looking forward to that one. I want to know who's going to be on the Jets roster in a few hours from now.
Well, that's the thing too, right? And we talk about, you bring up the Dallas Stars, a cup contending team, no doubt. Reports that when I woke up this morning, I saw a tweet from Elliot Friedman at 2:08 in the morning. That's not what time I woke up. That's what time
I
published
hope,
it.
I hope not.
No, 3:30 is when I was up at 3:26, actually.
Good God.
And yeah, it's the worst, Dan.
Yeah.
The fact that it appeared that he said they had the framework of a deal in place for Rantanen to Dallas.
Yeah.
And then about 40 minutes ago, more information was unearthed that the $12 million AAV that Dallas was prepared to offer Rantanen was, quote unquote, well short. So here's a 2-pronged question for you. Does Carolina know what they're doing when it comes to running a hockey team? I know they were a Final Four team not that long ago, but this Rantanen thing's a bit of a mess. What do you make of it?
Well, do they know what they're doing? You look at a lot of the names and players who've gone in and gone out of that franchise the last couple of years. It kind of makes you wonder. It's almost like they're too aggressive, I think, at times, and they haven't let things kind of unfold, but I understand too that they want to make changes. We know what their owner is like, Tom Dundon. He's a guy who gets his nose in there. So I guess it's been Pierre LeBrun who was saying all along when they acquired Rantanen that they acquired him to make a playoff run, not so much to take him and flip him, right? I mean, sometimes you're just going to have to give up assets to get somebody you really want. It's just, I don't remember anything like this really happening before, where a primetime player's been acquired and then not too long after that, they look at maybe flipping him somewhere. I mean, I'd say I'd be surprised if they flipped him, but after the evidence of the last couple of days, I guess not. And then, what are they going to get for him? It's an incredibly fascinating situation where things could really tilt the advantage to whoever gets Rantanen. And I mean, I know he hasn't lit it up since going to Carolina, but I think you have to look at it like he's a human being, right? He's always been an Avalanche and he loved it there. And so he's trying to take time to adjust, but yeah, there's some curious moves going on in Carolina. We're actually going to be there. We'll fly tonight to Raleigh after the game and play the Hurricanes on Sunday. So who knows what they'll look like then too.
It was a big goal for Seth Jones yesterday. So, I mean, he found some chemistry in Carolina before Mikko Rantanen did, but we'll see how that situation. I mean, with the Jake Gensel situation last year and now Mikko Rantanen again, and we go back to the Kotkaniemi offer sheet and Sebastian Aho, and it's interesting, which I guess, is a nice transition into another team we often wonder about. Do we know what's going on there? The Buffalo Sabres here. I can see you shaking your head.
Yeah.
The Dylan Cousins reports aren't going away. It appears a deal is imminent between Buffalo and Ottawa. Kevin Adams, the GM, tells TSN Hockey Insider Darren Dreger, save your picks. I don't want them. Give me players, give me players, give me players. How much stock do you put into how players perform on a team like Buffalo, that we've seen it before. Players leave that organization and they seem to kind of do well consistently. Is that something that crosses your mind when we talk about Dylan Cousins not having a great year?
I think so. I mean, it would have to drag you down, being
Yeah.
a Sabre year after year. And I say that with all due respect. And I feel for those fans. They have a lot of great fans. They have a lot of fans who are Canadian based and make the trip to the home games because it's a lot, it's not that expensive compared to maybe a Leafs game. But just either way, they do have a lot of fans who live in Canada. But I can remember like 5 or 6 years ago, Shaun, when I'm still working out of Montreal thinking, okay, the Sabres are going to take a step forward this next year. And then I'm like, shame on me. Show me first, right? They have to do something before anybody can kind of believe in it. But if you look at that trade, if it does happen, Cousins for Jacob Bernard-Docker and Josh Norris. I was going to say Dwayne. I played against his dad, Dwayne, way back 150 years ago. He was a terrific player too. So it seems like a lateral move, and I like Norris, but there's a guy who's always injured. He's got a shoulder problem, and JP was just talking about that. But I think when you do look at players who kind of get out of Buffalo, and I guess you can't say that to a man. Everybody who's been traded that they're better elsewhere, but there's something to it. I mean, it just has to grind you down and wear you down year after year when you just can't make the playoffs. And have they made any progress? Would that trade put them any further ahead? I wouldn't think so. So I kind of continue to still feel for the Sabres. Their play-by-play guy, Dan Dunleavy, I always have a chat with him, and I always think, man, it's tough to call games for a team too year after year when they just don't have success. And I had some of that in Montreal myself. It was not a lot of fun.
That's Dan Robertson, the voice of the Winnipeg Jets on TSN, joining us here on YouTube.com. There's something I've never said before when I talk with a guest. The back sell of the platform, normally, terrestrial radio, is where I spent the last 20 plus years. I'll end this soon. I want to ask you about the Canadiens. But before that, back to Winnipeg, right? What would you say the fans' expectation, not the rabid fan? Like if I took 10 opinions from the extreme, 10 opinions from the opposite extreme, we meet somewhere in the middle to get the annual average here. What do you think fans in Winnipeg are kind of expecting Kevin Cheveldayoff to do today?
Definitely get a quality number 2 centerman, and and he'll have to be creative now, right? I've heard you hear Scott Laughton out there, and I'm not trying to link him to the Jets, but for me, that's not going to do it, and it's not going to do it for Kevin Cheveldayoff either. It's just a guy, and with respect to him, he's a hard worker, pretty good two-way player. But if just to give you an idea for those who maybe don't follow the Jets so closely, their second line, it's been good, and they were really good last night. It's Vlad Nemesnikov with Cole Perfetti, Nikolai Ehlers, but they have to have more of a horse down the middle. So I really think if we go on the air tonight at 7:00 and say, the only trade the Jets made was acquiring Chris Drieger from the Florida Panthers for Kaapo Kähkönen, there's going to be, outrage, I would have to think. And so that's why I do believe something will happen. That's what they expect. They need to beef up on defense too, as I talked about, and not just the right side. Logan Stanley's really had his struggles. They're force feeding him into the lineup. Playing that third unit on the left side, and it's not been good enough. And we know you need a lot of defensemen, a lot of quality defensemen if you're going to get all the way to the Stanley Cup final, because just because of the war of attrition, or war of nutrition, as somebody once said on TSN 690. So we won't say who that guest was.
I won't. It wasn't rotisserie phone, was it?
No,
that guy who said rotisserie phone.
No,
we were talking once about what Melnick in the afternoon was. They brought up a rotary phone, and Buddy on the show thought it was a rotisserie.
Yes,
you mean a rotisserie phone? That's one of my all-time favorite TSN 690 clips in the history of that radio station.
If you're going to order chicken online, you have to call it a rotisserie.
Yeah. But did you have a favorite chicken spot when you were here? 8 years, Dan, in Montreal.
Yeah, so I lived in. Sorry, my phone keeps going crazy here.
Hey, if there's breaking news, you better get to it.
Nothing. It's my ex-wife looking for support. That's not true.
New phone. Who this?
Chalet Barbecue. So I was in NDG, and at the end I was Montreal West close to NDG, and
Yeah,
I loved it because I love the
so good.
fries. Oh, I love the fries. Love the, some of the waitresses had been there for quite some time, and I appreciated that.
Yes,
And
yes.
it's one of those things where even in NDG, when I got there, people are like, "You got to go here. You got to try this hole in the wall, and you have to obviously Momesso's, right?" And not that was a chicken place, but there were so many great little places like that. But
Yeah.
Chalet Barbecue I can taste it now. What a great spot.
Oh, so good, so good. Just waiting for Chalet. So yeah, I bring that up because I had Côte Saint Luc barbecue yesterday,
Okay.
and Chalet's the go-to, but Côte Saint Luc a little underrated because Chalet gets all the love. It's like this Schwartz's smoke meat. Everyone Schwartz's. There are
Right.
places in this city that make smoked meat, but
Yeah.
that's the big famous spot. So with that in mind, you still keep tabs. I know you're a hockey fan. I know you're a big sports fan in general, but
Yeah.
you brought up your ex-wife. Are the Canadiens your ex? You pay attention. You pay attention to your ex a little bit here.
Yeah, I still have carrying a torch around for one of them. I won't say which one. No, I can't help it. It's I just find it interesting because, and that's the thing that, so many of my buddies work at 690. You and Connor and Campbell and Gallo and JP and on we go. So and I listen all the time. It feels like in a way that I haven't left. So it's just you get immersed in a storyline for 8 years and you see it evolve, and then changes along the way take place, and you want to see where it all goes. So yeah, I mean it's certainly the team that I follow the second most, if that makes any sense. I can't help it. It's so funny. I mean, it's just to go back and not to make it about me, but when I started the job, I thought there's two things I would like to see happen. One of them would be the Canadiens to play the Leafs in the playoffs, and one of them would be to get to the Stanley Cup. Both of those things happened, but it was during COVID, so some of the shine came off there for me. But still, it was just a magical time. So I always hope the best for them because, I mean, if they do ever make a big run, and they will again someday, there's no place like it. There's no question about
that. So let's call it now. TSN is going with it, Dan. Breaking trade. It's official. Dylan Cousins to Ottawa for Norris, Jacob Bernard Docker, and part of the package anyway. Those are the bits that we can tell you officially now with 2 hours and 43 minutes to go before the 3 p.m. deadline. So it's Norris and JBD, Jacob Bernard Docker, to Ottawa. Dylan Cousins goes to Ottawa. Dennis Gilbert, a defenseman, 2026 second round pick. So it's official now. The panel, Jeff O'Neill talking about it, breaking it down. Quick reaction to the depth that Dylan Cousins, Kevin Adams gets what he wants. He gets some players, and the Ottawa Senators get somebody good to play behind Tim Stützle. What's your take here?
Yeah, I think Ottawa wins the trade. Just kind of the thumbnail of it. Cousins, it's funny to me, and I didn't track him that closely, but how quickly he, I don't want to say fell out of favor, but became available, right? He was the workhorse from Whitehorse and everybody's darling, and then it just kind of changed. So even if you look at it, and it's not Norris's fault, but you can't really depend on him to be healthy. That's one big thing. And there's a grit to Cousins' game that I like too. And you know what? Habs fans will kill me for this. I keep a close eye on the Senators too, because Dave Poulin, who I worked with a fair bit at TSN, I'm a big fan of his, and he's in the front office, and just like to see the Canadiens teams do well. That fan base deserves better than they've had the last little while. So, I hope he does well there. I think that's a good acquisition by them. Bernard Docker never really, at least to this point, panned out to, I don't think, to what the Senators would have hoped when they drafted him.
I don't want to be a hater, like Josh Norris, he's injury prone.
Yeah.
And you want bodies that you can plug and play right away. And I don't know. I don't have a good feeling. I think your take off the hop here is the right one. I think Ottawa wins this trade. And that's got to sting though, right? I mean, like how would you describe the Buffalo fan? I mean, that's always been a passionate market for as long as I've been alive,
Yeah, not just hockey, but football too, right? I know probably that's what you're getting at. So I liken it a little bit to Winnipeg. It's a smaller NHL city. Winters can be harsh, that sort of thing. Not that really plays into what we're talking about, but I get the sort of a symbiosis there. So when they are passionate about it, I just wonder if they're just kind of mostly resigned now to, I mean, you go through that year after year, you've got to lose some of your spark. So
Yeah.
that's why I would like to see them get in one of these years and make a run. I mean, it just goes to show too, not to get too far off topic, but you can get a lot of really high draft picks and still struggle for a really long time, right? They've had a couple of first overalls and really don't have a lot to show for it. It's just, I don't know what they're gaining by making this move. So, you know, hopefully Norris can stay healthy. He's good on the power play, but it is about health. So yeah, it's tough for Sabres fans, and you know, who knows where they'll draft again next year, and they'll regroup and try again. Will they have the same GM in the fall? I'm not sure about that, but on goes the saga in Western New York.
Well said. Dan Robertson, man, thanks so much for taking the time, joining us on youtube.com. Do you feel young on youtube.com? Is this for the youngs? Are we too old for this stuff, Dan? I don't know.
I probably am. I was just glad I was able to technically connect. I'm hanging on with my hand. You can see how it's a little wavy and that sort of thing.
But
we made it through.
And you got your hotel you're broadcasting from your hotel room today. Dan, brother, thank you so much. Enjoy the stretch ride. We'll be listening and we'll be watching. And if the Canadiens don't get into the tournament, we'll be cheering for the Winnipeg Jets.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thanks a lot, Shaun.
You're the best. There he goes. There is the voice of the Winnipeg Jets on TSN Regional, formerly voice of the Montreal Canadiens on TSN 690. My dear friend, the great Dan Robertson. So, yeah, here we go. Travis Green is speaking right now to the Senators. If you're just joining us live on youtube.com, here we are. We've been at this for an hour and 20 minutes. Dylan Cousins to the Senators, along with defenseman Dennis Gilbert, and a second-round pick in 2026. To Buffalo goes for Josh Norris and defenseman Jacob Bernard Docker. So this is what we spoke about with TSN hockey insider Darren Dreger this morning on TSN 690. Go to our website and you can find the interview if you missed it, when he told us that he spoke with GM Kevin Adams and he spoke about the wants and needs of the Buffalo Sabres, and they want ready-to-go plug-and-play players. So we have our first major deal of trade deadline day. It's been awfully quiet since the market opened and TSN hit the air live at 8 o'clock in the morning. We've been at this since 11 a.m. today. So as it stands right now, we just went through the biggest deal, and Travis Green, as I said, is talking right now. So we'll see what the reaction is from that in a few moments. But that's the big deal. If you missed it, a little minor deal. Andrei Kuzmenko goes to the LA Kings in exchange for a third-round pick in 2027 as LA and Philadelphia get on a deal. And as we also found out earlier today, the market for centermen on trade deadline day is not very strong. So that's why you're seeing reports of Scott Laughton in Philadelphia, Ryan Donato in Chicago. The potential of a bidding war could be happening as we're talking right now, the back and forth between organizations trying to make the best possible deal. So the reaction is coming in here as Joe Boozer suggests that you missed the boat with Dylan Cousins, who's got 5 years left, AAV of just over $7 million. He's on 11 goals. He's on 31 points this season. But, you know, as I mentioned and alluded to earlier with Dan there about, you know, how do you evaluate what Dylan Cousins has done after he got the bag? He's 24 years old. He does have a 70-point season under his belt. Was there an opportunity for the Montreal Canadiens to go out there and strike for a Dylan Cousins? I don't think so. I don't think the Montreal Canadiens, I don't believe, you know, if we talk about Josh Norris, injury prone, yada, 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 I don't think the Canadiens had the pieces to get this done with the Buffalo Sabres. I'm happy that Buffalo wasn't allergic to trading inside their own division. You know, it always made me laugh that teams looked at the Atlantic and said, oh, I don't want anything to do with the Atlantic division. I'm not trading. Well, Buffalo and Ottawa got something happen, and they traded major pieces. You know, so Buffalo, maybe they know something that we don't. Chances are slim. I don't think the Buffalo Sabres are the most organized organization, but nevertheless, they get Josh Norris, an injury-prone player, and Jacob Bernard Docker. And I don't think the Montreal Canadiens were in the business of trading away pieces that would have matched or bettered the offer that Ottawa gave to Buffalo today. And quite frankly, I don't even want to know what the names would have been because, yeah, Josh Norris is not Kirby Dach. Kirby Dach wouldn't have gotten it done. A defensive prospect, again, who are we talking about here? Are we talking about Arbor Jacki? Are we talking about Jaden Struble? Who are we talking about that the Montreal Canadiens are looking at? Engstrom? Are we talking about the Canadiens looking at a serious deal for Dylan Cousins? So I don't really see it that way, as Montreal missed the boat, because it's important to pay attention when insiders tell us stuff, when coaches tell us stuff. Sometimes they drop little crumbs, and it wasn't a crumb that Kevin Adams dropped. It was a giant loaf of bread, making it very obvious what was going on here. So I don't look at it through that window. Feel free to hit me up in the comments. If you feel differently, tell me what your hypothetical trade package would have been to get Dylan Cousins out of Buffalo if you believe Montreal needs Dylan Cousins. That I can get on board with. That I could see eye to eye with today. That, yes, Montreal needs depth. I've said this all week. I think the Montreal Canadiens are out of the reclamation project business. I believe they should be in the business of getting a proven player to play behind Nick Suzuki. I think that's the territory the Canadiens have found themselves in. So if you're comfortable throwing out a hypothetical that we can react to today, let's get going on what we're looking at. So as we find out some of the comments here from our pal Rick Smirgetti, Arbor Jacki would have been such a good acquisition for Buffalo. It's that type of player and attitude that they need in the lineup. I think it's an interesting point of view, because if we go back to the fourth and final game that Montreal played with Buffalo this season, right, where Montreal got off to a 3-0 lead again, and the vibe was strong, and then they basically had to hang on when Buffalo was running roughshod and playing some dirty hockey. What was Rasmus Dahlin up to? And I think that gets to Rick's point about the type of player the Buffalo Sabres need, that attitude, because when we go back to that game with Buffalo, it seemed like Rasmus Dahlin was trying to lead. He was like doing what he thought was required to be a leader on the ice, throwing Gallagher, running into the goalie, headhunting on Jake Evans, yada, yada, yada. That Rick's on the money when he talks about getting that tough kind of reputation. But where I think it falls short is, I think Buffalo falls short of experience. Who's teaching these guys how to lead, how to get into a hostile game without losing your mind and putting your team behind the eight ball with a tremendous lack of discipline? And that was Buffalo's problem basically in all four games against the Montreal Canadiens. The Canadiens power play was able to feast a little bit here on Buffalo. So it's been a very quiet NHL trade deadline. As the panel on TSN is more or less done reacting to the biggest deal we've seen. They've got former Flames defenseman there. I always liked him. Mark Giordano is a new add to the panel there to go along with James Duthie, Craig Button, Mike Johnson, and Jeff O'Neill. And fun little story. I don't know how many people were aware of this, but Craig Button grew up he's a Montreal guy. He's an NDG guy. And his father, Craig Button's father, was the man who basically started Central Scouting. And so Craig has obviously been very close to the National Hockey League since he was a little boy growing up here in NDG in Montreal. And now right there on the panel breaking down the biggest deal of the day. But that's it, guys. That's it. It's been quiet. Andrei Kuzmenko. Okay, Philadelphia retains 50% of Kuzmenko's salary. He just goes to Los Angeles. Philly gets a third-round pick. Anthony Beauvillier. There's a trade there. The Pittsburgh Penguins get a second-round pick this summer in exchange for Anthony Beauvillier. Jake Wallman. That's a deal. Done. Carl Berglund, a conditional first-round pick in 2026, goes to San Jose. So it's been kind of quiet overnight. The Brock Nelson deal. He's in Colorado. The New York Islanders get a couple of players and some conditional picks and everything else as we're waiting to see ultimately what shakes up today because there are still big names on the board, including Boston Bruins captain Brad Marchand. Is Brad Marchand going to be the next domino to fall? And always understand here that we talk about trades that come in after 3 o'clock. 3 o'clock. I'm not sure if everybody's on the same page here. The deadline is this afternoon at 3. And we always see deals that kind of come 3:15, even as late as maybe even 3:30, as I still believe they still go through the old-fashioned fax machine. So let's get to some of your comments today. Good morning, Christian, or good afternoon. What makes you think Josh Norris trade value is so high Canadians couldn't find something? Because I think when we look at what Ken Hughes and Jeff Gorton have said, even though insiders have been comfortable this week telling us that if there's a hockey trade to be made, if there's a big swing to be made, the Montreal Canadiens they would be active players there. So when we look at who do the Canadiens have at forward that you think Buffalo would be attracted to and they would greenlight a Dylan Cousins to Montreal trade? Again, when insiders drop crumbs or when managers in hockey drop crumbs, let's pay attention. So I'm going to repeat myself. Kevin Adams dropped a loaf of bread. He doesn't want prospects. So Michael Hage might be the answer. Joshua Roy is not the answer. Owen Beck is not the answer. I don't think Owen Beck is going to be a top 6 forward when he reaches a consistent level of play at the NHL level. Michael Hage, who a lot of people have high hopes on. As a matter of fact, Pierre Maguire on his podcast on YouTube mentioned that he would trade Michael Hage for Dylan Cousins. But again, Kevin Adams told everybody he wants players that can play now. Michael Hage is, I think, at least 2 years away from playing in the National Hockey League. So, if I have no reason to think Pierre is out to lunch when he talks about Michael Hage, but Buffalo is not in the business of waiting for Michael Hage to become an NHL player. So to me, that's where it would be. And again, the Canadiens have been very consistent in their messaging and their branding as it relates to this rebuild we're talking about here. And that is they are not aggressively leaving the path that they have traveled down that has taken them to become a team that is a single point away from being in the playoff picture and actually 2 points away from being a playoff team. Again, because of those tie-breaking rules, right? The Canadiens don't have the edge in the tie-break. So that's where Montreal is right now. So I don't think they had the firepower that would have accommodated the deal to get Dylan Cousins into Montreal, because I understand it. I watch this team just like you do. And I see the holes, right? The Canadiens haven't had a legitimate second line on a consistent basis all season. Kirby Dach was slow out of the gate. Patrick Laine shows up. Oh, they have some chemistry out of the chute. Patrick Laine is scoring goals all the time. And then, as you know, if you watch me regularly, I am a law of averages guy. I love the law of averages. And the law of averages generally prevails. I'm a passionate golfer. And, I've been in big money games. I've been in small money games. I've been in competitive games without money on the line. And I've been involved in various scenarios where guys out of the chute, they're 2 under through 3 holes. But, they're a 6 or 7 handicap. Do I sweat that? Man, I don't sweat that, because golf is a hard game. And I generally know, unless you're going to have the day of days, and that is such a rarity, it's an outlier, is that you will come back to me. I know you will. And so that's what I mean when I talk about the law of averages. Look what's happened here. Patrick Laine, as I've been talking about for weeks, Patrick Laine is not a good 5-on-5 player right now this season. End of sentence. He's not. He can't keep up. Defensive liability. Yes, he does some things well. He protects the puck well. He's obviously got a laser of a shot that's undeniable here. But at the end of the day, he is better suited, in my opinion, as a third-line player. Look at the Edmonton game. He played just over 10 minutes and got over 2 on the power play. That, to me, is Patrick Laine right now. That's who he is. So the ebbs and flows of the second line results in a very deep valley with Kirby Dach out for the season. On the positive note, as it relates to hurt players, as we spoke about an hour or so ago, the Caden Gooley is skating in Brossard today. So that's wonderful news. Wonderful news. But the Montreal Canadiens are in a tough spot. And I'm not afraid to tell you that I don't know what to do. I don't know what the Canadiens should do. I think ultimately I do default to not doing anything. I think I would let things breathe unless ultimately there's a waiver wire claim to be made somewhere, because if we look at the Ryan Donatos, the Scott Laughtons, the Ryan O'Reillys of the world, these are the centermen that I think teams are going to be looking at. And Montreal, in my opinion, is not really there. Not really there in terms of getting into a bidding war. So it's fun to see. And let me put this comment up here. Maybe Channel Zero just got onto the chat. Trade deadline, and this guy, my name is Shaun Starr, is still talking golf. Now, if you paid attention to me, or maybe you got here late, and if you do, maybe I shouldn't carve you up, because it's a ridiculous comment to make when I made a total comparison about the law of averages. It's the law of averages, Channel Zero. Maybe, I don't want to be too mean, because I feel like carving you up here, because it's an asinine comment to make. I was talking about law of averages and how it ultimately prevails in almost every situation. But you do you, Channel Zero. I look forward to your next live stream. So we got lots to get to here. I like this from my boy Ace's Cafe. What's up, Ace? Ace's Cafe, I believe Heineman is a top 6. Anyone else agree? It's funny too, right? Because we talk about what we see from certain players, right? So again, we talked about Patrick Laine. We talk about Patrick Laine and the lack of speed, but still playing 10 minutes a night. When we looked at Emil Heineman, how do you sort this through? And this is where, we need the insights of guys like Rick Springhetti, guys who have scouted, that have that trained eye. Because how do you separate, Emil Heineman doing what he did on the line with Armia and Evans with the managed amount of minutes he got? Is that the perfect place for Emil Heineman to be? Is that where he needs to be? Is that the sweet spot for Emil Heineman? Or can you get more from him if you give him more, right? And give is probably the wrong word. NHL players and NHL executives love to hammer home the earned it line about nothing is given, everything is earned. And so I think Emil Heineman has shown enough that he has earned an opportunity to see what he's got, because there are a few things I like about Emil Heineman. And let me get into them here, and it won't take long. And don't worry, I'm not going to bring up golf. But when we talk about Emil Heineman, understand that everybody's got a little bit of a story. Everybody's got a little bit of a story. And Emil Heineman's story is, he was involved in a trade with Florida. I think it was the Sam Bennett, or was the Reinhardt deal, one of those guys. And so in the early goings of his career, he gets drafted, boom, he's traded. Now he's dealing with injuries, goes to Calgary, right? Dealing with injuries there, and boom, he's traded again. Traded to Montreal. So he hasn't wet his beak in the NHL. He's still a kid. He's now on his 3rd team, and he's been dealing with injuries, right? So some organizations, they kind of look at you and they say, I'm just going to move you around. You're hurt. Can't get a good read on you, right? But then he comes to Montreal, and he's healthy finally. He's part of a good organization, a nurturing organization, and then he finds chemistry with Jake Evans and Yoel Armia, and boom, they're off to the races. And in the early blushes of the season, that Canadiens line was the most consistent line, right? You're waiting for Slafkovsky to find his groove, waiting for the top line to find consistency. In the meantime, the Evans, Armia, and Heineman line was going really strong. And that's the question is, I believe Emil Heineman's size. I like his on-ice attitude. I think he has the mental makeup to do well in this market. But did Martin St. Louis handle him so well that he maximized every bit out of Emil Heineman based on how he's played? Because that, to me, is a fascinating kind of situation. And it doesn't mean I'm not afraid to see Emil Heineman fail. That's not what I'm saying. I'm not afraid to see Heineman fail at all. But what I'm interested in is, what if he gets more? What if he gets more, and can he maximize that? Because when we look at Emil Heineman's numbers this season, and yes, he's having a good year. He's got 10 goals. He's played in 47 games, but he plays under 11 and a half minutes a night. So that's the question. The question is there room on the leash to let him run and see what he can do? The answer for me to that question is yes. Yes, 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 yes. Because, I think, Alex Newhook has had a good month, but it's not enough. It's not enough. When this team, and the team is getting closer to leveling up to being the version everybody here wants them to be, so that maybe at this time next year, when all of us are back doing a live stream on trade deadline day 2026 edition, we're going to be talking about the Canadiens in the mix for a rental, trying to spend some money, trying to bring someone into to deepen their roster for a playoff run. Because I do think if the Canadiens don't make the playoffs next year, I think that would be a failure. I do believe that. They have shown me enough signs this season, even with the injuries and even with the inconsistencies, that when it's go time, the core group, Nick Suzuki, Cole Caulfield, Uri Slafkovsky, Lane Hutson, Jake Evans, these guys are ready. These guys, I think the Montreal Canadiens should be in the playoffs next year. 1 point out going into Calgary at 7 o'clock. So we got lots of comments here. As Penelope Whiskey says, like the stock market, when in doubt about investing in a stock, do nothing. The same applies to the Habs. But sometimes, depending on how young you are, maybe you can be risky. I don't think the Canadiens are. I don't believe the Montreal Canadiens are in the risky business right now, personally. Athanasios, the Canadiens need to sell. Savard out, Dvorak out. If Armia won't sign a team-friendly deal, out. Sell and keep playing to be in the mix. If it results in a playoff appearance, that's great. And again, that's where I think when I look at David Savard, the fact that David Savard, his better days are clearly behind him, but he still plays upwards of 18 minutes a night. 18 minutes a night on the right side. And you know what? He's a shot blocking machine. Okay, he's also a bit of a pylon. I get it. And gets moved around. I get it. But if we're talking about David Savard versus Winnipeg's second round pick, like I don't think David Savard is a 2-asset guy. I don't think he gets you a pick and a player, right? I don't think that. Could be wrong. I hope I'm wrong. But in the world in which David Savard gets you, let's say, Winnipeg's second-round pick, I think the Canadiens would be better off keeping David Savard for the run to the 82nd game of the season and where they go. Thank you, Charlottetown Spud. If Buffalo only wanted a now player, that shows dysfunction on that team. They're not winning anytime soon. Who knows what future picks and prospects they could have received. So I am with you on Buffalo and the uncertainties. I don't know, man. I don't know. But if I think about Buffalo, I think about the Montreal Canadiens. And let me see if I can tie this together, okay? The Montreal Canadiens are, I think, if the right... Oh, to the Jets. Luke Schenn. There you go. So the Penguins get a second and a fourth. And to the Jets goes Luke Schenn. So David Savard to the Winnipeg Jets, I think, is over. I think we can scratch that off the board. So I think that's what we've got now. We have our latest trade in to the Jets defenseman Luke Schenn from the Pittsburgh Penguins. In exchange, it's a second and a fourth round pick. So here it's perfect timing. It's perfect timing because we're talking about David Savard. And now that Winnipeg got Luke Schenn, I think David Savard to Winnipeg is over. But see, I knew this answer was going to come in. As Alex points out, Mailloux could replace Savard if it's too soon. See, the problem there is I don't think Logan Mailloux is ready yet. I'm going to have Sean Campbell on the show. We're going to record this weekend. We'll have content about the Rocket and the deadline and everything else. And we're going to talk about that. We're seeing reports of another big signing here. I've seen the rumors. Lots of stuff seems to be happening here. Here we go. I've seen the rumors of Brad Marchand in Toronto. I would be shocked if Marchand is a Leaf. Also seeing reports that maybe Dallas and Mikko Rantanen have found common ground here. Let me check around because I could tell you what I saw last as it relates to Mikko Rantanen, Dallas, and Carolina. That Rantanen close to Star's extension at $12 million. So here we go. It seems like tsn.ca now. Thank you, Corey Crawford and others that have pointed this out in the chat this morning. Here's Corey. Corey brought this up at 12:43, so a minute ago. According to the Score, says Corey, that the Rantanen deal, because there was reports earlier today that the AAV of $12 million for Rantanen to Dallas was not close. So maybe they are revisiting this. And holy cow, the Carolina Hurricanes, man, are they doing it again? Marty Necas gets dealt out, and now the possibility here of Mikko Rantanen leaving Carolina. Holy cow. The Carolina Hurricanes, if this is true, what the hell is going on in Carolina? So if we get back to, let's wait for that trade to happen. Let's wait to that. You're a funny guy, Bubble T. You're a funny guy. So let me ask you this. Before we get, I'm waiting for TSN to confirm this. The Mikko Rantanen to Dallas. So until they do, I'm just going to stay on this Jets Luke Schenn acquisition. The fact that Luke Schenn goes to Winnipeg in exchange for a second and a fourth, do you not think, like I do, what do you think? Do you not think that David Savard playing 18 minutes a night is more valuable to the Canadiens today in present day than a second or a fourth? I'm sorry. I think the Canadiens are in the right for not taking two more draft picks for David Savard. I'd rather see the Montreal Canadiens ride and die with David Savard, blocking shots, playing 18 minutes a night for the remaining 20 games of the season. I would be fine. Because and I do agree here, Ricky. I do agree. Now that Luke Schenn is gone, he's going to Winnipeg. I think they've got their guy. And so I don't see it any other way. And that's why, I think we've had the opinion we've had here. Once we've seen the market price be set, we've seen the Canadiens where they are competitively speaking, a point out of a playoff spot today, that they're not in the territory of overpaying or getting involved in a bidding war for Ryan O'Reilly, for Ryan Donato, for take your pick, Scott Laughton. Those are the names that teams are looking at to fill voids or to deepen the center position within the organization. Montreal, again, not in that territory today, but they are in the territory, as far as I'm concerned, of taking on a contract, taking on a player that could be slotted in that 2C role as early as tomorrow night in Calgary, Alberta. That could help this team and bolster their chances of catching the likes of Ottawa, catching the likes of Columbus, perhaps, right? The BJ's still there in the playoff spot with 68 points. They lost 3-0 to Florida on Thursday. Ottawa having that second wild card, and Ottawa got Dylan Cousins today. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens here. Thank you, everybody, with all the golf talk. I don't want to upset people. People are here for hockey talk, and I'll give the people what they want. And people are asking me if do I want to do a golf podcast as a side project. You see what happens? You bring up golf. It's my addiction. I can't help myself. As Aces Cafe says, David Savard is worth more in the clubhouse than a draft pick. Thank you, Costa. At some point, you need to cut ties with Savard. Being emotional is what makes you lose focus on the big picture. I don't see it that way, bro. I don't see it. I have zero emotion as it relates to David Savard as far as forming my opinions are concerned. I've been on the radio for a long time, and I've said this line forever. Loyalty is a losing proposition in pro sports. Loyalty is how it gets you into Brendan Gallagher type contracts. No disrespect to Brendan Gallagher who's having a solid season, but I think we can all agree that cap hit in that contract was never good as soon as it was signed. I try to approach my analysis with a good amount of logic, certainly well ahead of emotion, no doubt. And that's how I try to express my point of view with David Savard. Nothing to do with emotion. It's logic. The Canadiens have a surplus of draft picks. They don't need another fourth-round pick. They don't need it. David Savard playing 18 minutes a night ahead of Logan Mailloux, who is not ready to play at the NHL level, And I can tell you, the Montreal Canadiens leadership took on the challenge of winning games. They were told by Ken Hughes, go win games. You want me to change my mind? You want to have a different strategy? You don't want me to sell Jake Evans or Christian Dvorak, who is roommates with Cole Caulfield? What's up, Henke? Hi, Henke. He's a good boy. You know, you don't want those things? Then go win freaking games. And what did they do? They won 5 in a row out of the chute. So understand that you're dealing, it's more than just one singular component. As I've spoken about a lot, the NHL is and NHL teams are living organisms. They evolve and change all of the time. And so when I look at David Savard and what he means to this team, that the team is in the fight. Jake Evans got extended by 4 years. You can't rug pull these guys when they took on the challenge that you put at their feet. At least that's how I see it. Now, if we're talking about like the Canadiens could get something better than a second round pick, if we're talking a first round pick for David Savard, different conversation. And I would have a very different point of view than the one I have right now. So I just wanted to clear that up if there was such a thing. As Urban Youth points out, there's no such thing as too many draft picks, sir. Yes and no. Yes and no. When it comes to a 4th round pick, yes, there are too many of them. And listen, I can get on board, sir, with 2nd round picks if you want to sweeten pots for other deals. But again, if we're talking specifically about David Savard for a 2nd and a 4th round pick, I think that David Savard is more valuable to this team today and for the rest of the season than those picks would be. Because again, while I hear your point, Urban Youth, no such thing as too many picks. Sometimes you got to do the math on the likeliness of a 2nd round pick hitting in the NHL, being an everyday player, or a 4th round pick being an everyday player. David Savard is an everyday player for your team that is 1 point out of a playoff spot. And I think you have to weigh the checks and balances of all of those things. Good morning. See, I'm so used to doing lives. Like usually people that watch me on the regular here, I do lives Saturdays and Sundays at 9:30 in the morning. Hi, Hanky boy. I do live Saturdays and Sundays in the morning. And of course I work on the morning show on TSN 690. So I'm very used to saying good morning. Alain, good afternoon. Montreal ever makes any moves during this time of year, we always expect them to do something, but they never do. Every year it's the same. I mean, to each their own. I never thought for a second that I didn't really think the Canadiens were going to be doing much. Once we kind of saw the fact that Jake Evans got extended, that was the biggest name on the board. He was the biggest name on the board in terms of who the Canadiens had that was probably expendable. And trying to see the gone to the trade breakers here. Bob McKenzie's talking. There's no subtitles, so I can't see what he's saying. In the aftermath of Dylan Cousins, maybe the Mikko Rantanen deal will be confirmed by TSN here in a second. But I wasn't expecting the Montreal Canadiens after the Evans extension. I didn't think they were going to be super aggressive. There we go. Toronto gets their guy. Traded to Toronto. He's gone from Philadelphia. Scott Laughton, 30-year-old centerman, goes to the Toronto Maple Leafs. Another massive deal. So there we have it. Scott Laughton traded to the Maple Leafs by the Philadelphia Flyers. And let's look now, because good on Toronto, man, because they put Ryan Reeves on waivers to free up some money. And they watched Florida make some moves. They had no choice. Boston is resetting. It appears that probably they're going to trade Brad Marchand, it appears. And I think we can take Brad Marchand off the Maple Leafs radar now. Scott Laughton goes to Toronto. So good on the Maple Leafs for making a move they had to make. They had to make this move because the powers that be, heck, the defending Stanley Cup champions are all about making all these moves. Yeah, see, Hank's back to sleep now. All right. Hank's back to sleep now. There he is. Oh, there he is. Yes, hello, sir. Yes, you're a good boy. So finally we got some moves, everybody. We've got some moves. So if you're just joining us now, as we've reached over 300 on the live stream, thank you so much for spending some of your NHL trade deadline with me on youtube.com. If you missed it, we had some great guests today. I had Marco D'Amico at the start of the stream, so almost 2 hours ago. JP O'Connor, who was on the Habs broadcast in Edmonton last night, and Dan Robertson on the Winnipeg Jets. So let's recap some of the deals we've seen here as the Maple Leafs just pulled off a big move. They get Scott Laughton from Philadelphia. We're waiting to see what Philadelphia gets in return. Elsewhere, Brandon Tanev, the forward, leaves Seattle. The Kraken get a 2027 second-round pick. Brandon Tanev is now a Winnipeg Jet. Elsewhere, Luke Schenn goes to the Winnipeg Jets. Pittsburgh gets a pair of picks. Second rounder next year, a fourth rounder the year after that. Major trade. Dylan Cousins, Dennis Gilbert, and a second-round pick goes to Ottawa. Buffalo gets Jacob Bernard-Docker and Josh Norris. So those are the big deals that have happened. Brock Nelson happened earlier this morning, just after midnight. Brock Nelson leaves the Islanders, and he goes to the Colorado Avalanche. So we've got some big deals here waiting to see again. What exactly the Leafs gave up, because as we found out that Scott Laughton out of Philadelphia, what was going to be required, what was speculated, what was reported, the Philadelphia Flyers were looking for a first-round pick plus. So maybe 3 assets in exchange for Scott Laughton. So that's where we're waiting to see what happens now. Good afternoon, Lior. Thank you so much. Morgan suggests the Leafs are desperate. Listen, of course, wouldn't you be desperate? Listen, this team is chronically underachieved since they've had their version of Murderers Row and Marner and Nylander and Matthews. They have to do something. They need a depth down the middle, and I think the Leafs shouldn't be done. The Leafs need defensive help, major. Leafs need some help on D. I like their goaltending situation this year more than I have in the past. They needed to make a move because Florida was making big moves. They needed to make something happen. I don't know if it was desperate as opposed to just good hockey business. What else have we got here today? Luke Schenn to Winnipeg. Yes, sir. We've been talking about that for a while now. As Morgan asks, is there a center available that can plug into our lineup and get us into the playoffs? I don't, I mean, maybe, as Chris Elliman points out here, do you want Trevor Zegras? It's going to be fascinating to see, because I don't think, yes, as George puts out here, of all the centermen that have been available here, I would love to have Ryan O'Reilly on the Montreal Canadiens. I think Ryan O'Reilly would be let me tell you something. Ryan O'Reilly would be a good fit here. At Murderers Row, let me tell you something. If the Montreal Canadiens had Mitch Marner, Austin Matthews, and William Nylander, I promise you would be calling them Murderers Row. The Montreal Canadiens in your lifetime, in my lifetime, have never had 3 players like this, ever. Unless you're, of a certain age. Yes, they have underachieved chronically. I don't disagree. Austin Matthews, Mitch Marner, and William Nylander are phenomenal players. Phenomenal players. So I stand by it. As Morgan speculates here, apparently the Ryan O'Reilly denied a trade to the Toronto Maple Leafs. And I'm out of the Trevor Zegras business for whatever that's worth. I suggested Alex Venberg earlier, left-handed shot, only signed for 2 years. Could have had a decent cost from San Jose that wants future assets. And that's, I was in favor of the Canadiens maybe trading away one of their first-round picks. I really was. When it comes to the possibility of, can they get a player with term? Because, again, I don't see this team being in that rental window today. I really don't. And they're not going to give up the assets, and they're not going to compete with the teams that are in bidding wars for, Toronto's getting Scott Laughton here now, and what other teams were ultimately going to do, right? Is Ryan Donato going to get extended in Chicago or not? But yes, as some have pointed out here, if there's a way to get O'Reilly, then that would be, I think, a great move for the Canadiens, because in my mind, it checks off multiple boxes. In my mind, You get a player, granted, who doesn't have a lot of pace to his game, but I think he makes up with pace with hockey IQ. I think we're talking about a leader. I think we're talking about a winner. And I think we're talking about, in Ryan O'Reilly's case, one of those air quote good veterans. We talk about this all the time, right? How about that beauty goal that, what's his face? Corey Perry scored last night on the Canadiens to open it up, right? Nice backhand goal. That's a good veteran. That's a good veteran. Ryan O'Reilly to me is in that category. Good veteran that I think the Montreal Canadiens could use in their room as they grow to become a good team one day. I was going to say great, but you know what I mean. This is some of the most sports I've talked in my career. You know, this is a lot of talking. And thank you. We had one guest. Thank you, by the way, everybody, for the super chat stickers today. Charlottetown Spud, thank you so much. Thank you so much, Rick Springhetti and Steph Howard. Your support to the program always means the most, and it allows us to be able to continue to do this and have some fun. But yeah, we were on the air from 6 a.m. until 10 a.m. today. And here we are doing another live stream. Big thanks to my guests. Marco D'Amico joining us from the Cayman Islands. So you can go back to the beginning of this live stream today where we had Marco D'Amico on talking about the Canadiens, what we think they're going to do. Then we transitioned into JP O'Connor at 11:30. And then at noon, the great Dan Robertson joined us to talk about the Winnipeg Jets and ultimately keeping tabs on all things Montreal Canadiens. So don't forget, I will be back here coming up Saturday morning at 3 o'clock. Yeah, still nothing on the Mikko Rantanen front. And so I was gonna have another guest on today, but it was a last second cancellation. And originally I wanted to go up until 1 o'clock today. I originally had the stream planned to go for 2 hours. The longest stream I've personally ever done. Generally, I go for about an hour, Saturdays and Sundays at 9:30. But as of now, with the trade deadline now under 2 hours away from deadline day itself at 3 o'clock this afternoon, we've got a couple of big deals on the board. And so you can keep it locked to tsn.ca, watch on TSN for all the big deals coming in. And don't forget, you can be with me tomorrow morning at 9:30. I will be back here live as we recap. Wait a minute. Hold on. Looks like TSN is going back to the trade breakers. Hey, don't look now, everybody. Trade breakers on TSN is brought to you by a golf company. I hope some of you people can handle that mentally. I don't want you to have a meltdown because on Trade Center, their trade breakers segment is brought to you by a golf company. So Darren Dreger's talking now. I wonder if they're breaking down the, you know what I was tempted to do today? I was tempted, because I have an in at TSN. I was tempted to reach out to the powers that be in Toronto, and I wanted to ask them if I could just stream tsn.ca on the channel, like when they're talking now, like Chris Johnson is talking now about. So here we go. So it's a conditional first-round pick to the Flyers for Scott Laughton. And for Nikita Grebenkin goes to Philadelphia. Scott Laughton, a sixth-round pick, goes to the Toronto Maple Leafs. So it's interesting because the ask earlier this morning for Scott Laughton was a first-round pick plus, so 2 more. But it looks like they got that conditional first-round pick and a forward named Nikita Grebenkin. To Toronto goes Scott Laughton, a 4th round and a 6th round pick. You should, brother. You should. How come Cousins goes to the Ottawa Senators? We couldn't have easily afforded him, says Big R. I don't think the Canadiens had the pieces that they were willing to trade for Dylan Cousins. They're a very patient group, this managerial team here. I like them quite a bit. And so Mikko Rantanen's still on the board. Brad Marchand is still on the board. Fascinating to see the Boston Bruins strategy. Fascinated to see the Boston Bruins' strategy, man, about retooling on the fly. I have very little faith that Cam Neely and Don Sweeney are going to be able to pull this off in Toronto. Steph Howard, thank you so much for the compliment. Yeah, I'm very proud. I'm so happy. I think my previous record for live stream viewers was 256, something like that. We hit over 300 a couple of different times today. Yeah, it's awesome. It's awesome to see the support here, the consistent support, right? You know, flash in the pan every now and again, but yeah. Please hit the like button. It just helps the channel grow. Nice to see Jonathan Kovacevic gets an extension by the New Jersey Devils. As Charles points out here, as we talk, as some people have wondered why Montreal couldn't be in on Cousins, the Senators are much stronger now, much more difficult for the Habs to make the playoffs this season. The Canadiens, I could tell you, it was still a very much a long shot, like in that 13 to 14% range. So that's the other part too, was that Ottawa is a little bit better positioned to make those moves for Dylan Cousins. Like, the Canadiens are growing here. They're putting it together. Thank you, George. You know, as I was talking to some people, you know, about the podcast and figuring it all out and everything, I'm very, very fortunate. You know, like I don't want to be sappy or whatever, but I try to be as honest and as transparent as I can at all times. You know, in a weird way, it's almost therapeutic for me, where I can get it off my chest and get it out of my mind. I have no problem communicating how I feel. I've never had that problem in my life. As my mom always used to tell me in my younger days when I lived with my parents, she used to tell people all the time, nobody loves the sound of their own voice than my son. And luckily for me, I've been able to make a living out of talking into a microphone, you know? So I can talk and I can talk and I can talk. And I like being honest. I like showing, you know, kind of who I am, how I'm wired. I'm imperfect. I've got strengths, I've got weaknesses, blah, 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 blah. There are people on YouTube in the Montreal Canadiens space that do great. And I think that, you know, I watch other channels regularly. I want to see what they do, how they do it, who they do it with, you know? And I watch a bunch of other channels, people I used to work with, people I've never worked with. And I'm very hard on myself. I'm very, very, very hard on myself. Detrimental sometimes. And I've learned, now hold on, don't get mad at me. I've learned through golf, reading a bunch of different books from Dave Rotella and others, that beating yourself up is not good. It's not good. And so I can think that that my channel on YouTube or my career on the radio is average at best. And so when I see the support, you know, and I see the compliments and everything else, they mean a lot. I see them, I read them, you know, I try to react to a lot of them. But I will say, if I were ever able to really pat myself on the back, what sets me apart, I think, from other people is a huge advantage, a colossal, meteoric size advantage, is that I have been on the radio for a long time in Montreal. And I've had the good fortune of talking to a lot of Montreal Canadian fans over the course of my broadcasting career. And I have the huge advantage of having an audience on terrestrial radio that some of them have come with me into the YouTube space. And I think for me, that's a massive separation. But when I look at some other channels that have, like, what are we at now? I'll do a quick refresh. 5,161 subscribers, right? Huge. Getting the 5,000 subs is huge, right? And if you ever want, I can help you. If you want to be better at YouTube and you want to do your own channel, I have spent so much time studying, learning YouTube. I can help you down the path of how to get a YouTube channel off the ground. What are the boxes you need to check and do them right away to get your YouTube channel to find success quicker than not, right? I can definitely, and I love to help. But when I think about the fact that I have over 5,100 subs, and I see other Montreal Canadian channels that have 18, 19,000 subs, almost 4x what I have. And then I see my view count versus other channels, and I'm like, mad respect to my guys and girls. My audience is 94.1% male. So, hello, ladies, and tell your friends, so I'm very proud of the fact that my YouTube channel, while not as big as others that have been established, and remember, I started to do this YouTube channel a little bit more seriously in early November. In early November, I started to do this with everyday consistency. Those other channels have been doing it for literally years. And I, I won't say what I want to say there, but I'm very, very, very proud of the fact that y'all have been so supportive and so consistent with this project of mine. So yeah. So thank you everybody for just being super supportive and everything else. And so if I could tell you now, because I'm about to wrap up the stream here today, 2 hours and 10 minutes, I will be back live tomorrow morning at 9:30 a.m. I have a business meeting at 2 p.m. today. I have a business meeting at 2 p.m. today. And hopefully that goes well. And then I can bring some of that good news back into the channel. We'll see how the meeting goes at 2 o'clock today. But ultimately, to wrap it all up, there will be golf content on this channel soon. And I've expressed my vision as it relates to golf on YouTube on the Shaun Starr Show before. And now, basically the strategy at play here, a lot of people are talking about how great golf is on YouTube, but I've been a YouTube golf watcher for years. Rick Shields was the first guy I started to really watch on the regular. And then I got into Bob Does Sports, and I got into Grant Horvat golf. I got into a little bit of good. But I'm more inclined now to watch good golf content as opposed to like Bob Does Sports. They'll do a challenge of they got to eat 30 tacos a hole or something silly like that. That's fun for me. But I like good golf. I like to watch good golfers play good golf. So that's the strategy. Coming up later this summer, probably going to do some 9-hole challenges. I'm going to bring on some friends, friends that friends that you like, and we'll do some golf challenges together. My handicap, my index is 2.1. I'm about a 3 or a 4, depending on the course rating that I'm playing that day. And so I can see a world in which, let's say, how about this? Let's say it'll be me and my friends on the radio. So I'll put Mitch Gallo, Sean Campbell, and Simon Salikas. And I'll give them all the shots in the world, and they will try to beat me over 9 holes on a handicap type system. So I may have to give them 9 or whatever it may be. And yes, I'm a huge Grant Horvath fan. I love his content. The guests he has on, and he is such a great player, and it helps. His dad was a pro and everything else. Well, thank you so much. I'm happy you were able to spend some of your workday with me and Athanasios. It's been great hearing you on the radio for 20 years, and to get that extra content on YouTube, thanks for that. You're a pro. Well, I appreciate all that support. So thank you, everybody. Don't forget, I will be back live on Saturday morning at 9:30. And that's it. I don't think we have any other major trades to announce here. It looks like the Rantanen deal seems to be close between Carolina and Dallas. The Jets get Luke Schenn. Scott Laughton goes to Toronto. And that, my friends, is a wrap. The Montreal Canadiens have not done anything. So enjoy the rest of NHL trade deadline. Enjoy Friday. Hope you have a great weekend. And hopefully I'll see some of you, if not all of you, back here coming up Saturday morning at 9:30 for another edition of the live version of the Shaun Starr Show. So Rick, Bim, Mike, Ricky, Dave, Peter Puck, Athanasios, Dave Laws, Scout, Carlo, Rodney, so many, Ace, Michelle, the amount of comments and views we got today. Hit the like button. Thank you so much for being a member of the Shaun Starr Show, and we'll see you live tomorrow morning to recap the rest of NHL trade deadline today. Enjoy. Hopefully, we get some big moves between now and 3 p.m. or shortly thereafter. Have a great day.